Chapter 448. Marquis, I have a plan. Black Snake didn't want to lose and thought of a plan. Speak. There's a territory in the south of Zhaoqing County called Wulong County. It's basically been conquered by the Black Snake Guards. I suggest we form an alliance with Wulong County and teleport our army to the rear. We'll give them a taste of their own medicine. Ouyang Shua glanced at the Black Snake in astonishment when he heard this. Are you confident? Forming an alliance wasn't a problem, but he was afraid of alerting the enemy. With the fall of Tianchuan County, the Mountain Sea Alliance Tianchuan Alliance would disband. In Zhaoqing County, Shanghai City was isolated and helpless. I'm willing to make a military pledge. Black Snake's tone was resolute. All right, I'll give you 2 days. Ouyang Shua decided to take the risk. Black Snake might look rough, but he was meticulous. Since he dared to make such a promise, there must be no problem. On the 10th of August, the army of the Protectorate of Southern Border started moving. In Shanghai City, under the command of Wang Feng and Zhao Kuo, 3,000 divine guards gathered at the North Seaport. They followed the first fleet of the North Bay Fleet to Jiaozhou Port for a surprise attack on Jade Buddha County. The entire journey was 4,000 nautical miles and would take at least 10 days. In Qiongzhou County, Sun Bin led the 1st Division of the Tiger Legion and continued to suppress the local resistance. The 2nd and 4th Divisions of the Tiger Legion broke camp and went to Qiangshan Prefecture. Then they crossed the Qiongzhou Straits and landed in Liizhou County. Then they went through Liizhou County and met up with the army in Zhaoqing County. The entire journey was over 2,000 kilometers. Even with a rapid march, it would take the army at least 20 days to reach the battlefield. This showed how troublesome it would be to fight across regions without a teleportation formation. Apart from reinforcing Zhaoqing County, there was another reason for mobilizing the 2 divisions of the Tiger Legion. The purge in Qiongzhou County was coming to an end. Next, it would be too wasteful to place an organized army like the Tiger Troop in Qiongzhou County. Ouyang Shua planned to have Fan Lihua lead the 1st Division of the Tiger Legion and station them in Qiongzhou County for a long time. Not to forget that the Cliff Mountain Fleet was still expanding. In the future, Qiongzhou County's military would be dominated by the Navy. On the island, there was the 1st Division of the Tiger Troop in the Field Army. Together with the Qiongzhou County Guard Division, it was enough. Using this opportunity to gradually move the Tiger Troop to the Lingnan battlefield was another of Ouyang Shua's intentions. The next step, be it attacking the Qiyu City or the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, would require a large army. Apart from that, after conquering Zhaoqing County, they would also need to station troops at the eastern border. At the same time, the first formation of the Cliff Mountain Fleet departed from Nanshan Harbor, rendezvoused with the first formation of the North Bay Fleet at sea, and then headed for Jiaozhou Harbor together. This was the first time the 2 fleets were assisting in a battle, so it was a good chance for them to practice on the sea. The only difference was the Imperial Guard Division. The Imperial Guard Division had just finished assembling and received military orders to set up camp in the barracks for the time being. Even if Ouyang Shua wanted to launch a sneak attack on the rear of the Allied forces, he did not dare to use the Tiger Legion's 2nd and 4th Divisions. The 3 divisions were active behind the enemy lines. Once they ran out of rations, the consequences would be unthinkable. Only a trump card regiment like the Imperial Guard Regiment could take on such a heavy responsibility. Ouyang Shua believed that even if they didn't receive any rations, the Imperial Guard Division would be able to solve the problem of rations on the spot. As the saying went, before the troops and horses moved, the rations and fodder moved first. The War Preparedness Department had never stopped stocking up on strategic resources. Every prefecture and county had their own military granaries to store rations, and they were guarded by the local city defense troops. Therefore, as long as the army marched within the territory, they would be able to get supplies wherever they went. This way, they could save a lot of manpower and resources. As the Battle of Zhaoqing unfolded, under the War Preparedness Department's control, large amounts of rations and fodder were transported to the front line. Now that the situation had changed, the front line needed more soldiers, and the originally estimated amount of rations and fodder was not enough. Therefore, when the various armies set off, the War Preparedness Department had already started a new round of rations and fodder allocation. The War Preparedness Department's Chief Gu Hongliang was personally stationed in Liuzhou County, supervising the transportation of rations and fodder. Other than rations and fodder, there were also weapons, arrows, siege equipment, and a lot of other military supplies. For this, the War Preparedness Department set up an armory in every county. Then, they set up armory level by level in the prefectures and counties. Ordinary arrows were no longer supplied by Shanghai City's weapons workshop, but by the weapons workshops in the prefectures and counties. One had to know that in a war, hundreds of thousands of arrows would be used up. If the war went on for a long time, it was normal to use up millions of arrows. Just by relying on Shanghai City's supply, the cost of transportation alone was more than the cost of the arrows themselves. Whether it was the huge amount of rations or the large amount of arrows and other military supplies, they were all consumed in real money. The expenditure of a war on the territory's finances was unimaginable in other areas. Gu Hongliang's plan for a tiered combat readiness system was praised by Ouyang Shuo. Combat readiness was the lifeline of a war. Ouyang Shuo was very satisfied with Gu Hongliang as the chief of the War Preparedness Department. In the future, Shanghai City's military would only be responsible for producing high-end equipment, such as radiant armor and infantry armor. Other items such as tang swords, lances, and arrows would all be produced by the workshops in the prefectures. Other than considering the craftsmen, there was also the issue of iron or supply. In terms of mineral resources, Gaia's design was very realistic. Not only did a mine have a maximum reserve, but there was also the issue of mining difficulty. With the mining standards of ancient times, they could only mine a small portion of the minerals on the surface. If they took the risk to mine the minerals that were buried deep underground, lives would be lost. The gains did not make up for the losses. There were 2 iron mines in the western suburbs of Shanghai City. The earliest one, which was also the one that was explored during the village stage, had already been mined dry and could no longer be mined. It was officially sealed off. The second mine was also on the brink of being depleted. In the past 1.5 years, Shanghai City had produced too many weapons and equipment, and the consumption of iron ore was very shocking. Apart from that, there was also the steel mill that had been built, which was a huge demand for iron ore. Ouyang Shuo had looked for a mineral expert to calculate that the iron mines in the entire Lianzhou prefecture could only last for another 1.5 years at the current rate of iron ore consumption of Shanghai City. After 1.5 years, Shanghai City would be in the awkward situation of having no iron ore to use. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he panicked on the spot. He did not expect that after the food shortage, a new round of resource crisis would come to his territory. In his previous life, Ouyang Shuo was only an adventure-type player. He had some impression of the price of food, but he did not pay much attention to iron ore. He did not expect that it would almost lead to a huge mistake. Fortunately, he discovered it in time, and it was not too late to remedy it. If it was not for Shanghai City's excessive consumption of iron ore, this problem would not have been exposed so early. By then, it would really be too late. Ouyang Shuo was also a decisive person. He immediately ordered that the mining speed of the iron mines in Lianzhou Prefecture be reduced by half to ensure the iron ore reserves in the base camp. After all, transporting iron ore from other places was a very tiring and costly matter. It was much more troublesome than transporting food. Sealing off the iron mines in Lianzhou Prefecture was just a temporary solution. Ouyang Shuo then issued an imperial edict, requesting all counties to immediately organize people to investigate the reserves of iron ore and other mines in their counties and report it to the War Preparedness Department. The good news was that more than a dozen large iron mines in Cheongzhou Prefecture and Liuzhou Prefecture had been discovered. Ouyang Shuo immediately ordered the 2 counties to increase the intensity of iron ore mining. In addition to the county's consumption, more than half of the iron ore was to be intercepted and transported to Shanghai City by sea. For this, Ouyang Shuo specially ordered the shipyards to build specialized cargo ships. Compared to land transportation, sea transportation was much more convenient. The transportation cost was also lower, and it was still within an acceptable range. Because of this, the iron ore shortage in Shanghai City was slightly alleviated. Even so, Ouyang Shuo still did not dare to be careless. He could foresee that as the territory expanded, the size of the army would also increase. The demand for weapons and equipment would only increase. Correspondingly, the consumption of iron ore would also increase. Other than that, he had to mention the 7th Research Institute. The team of experts in the 7th Research Institute had expanded to more than 100 people. After the steel mill was built, the research on steel parts had entered a critical stage. In the future, it was possible to manufacture guns, cannons, and even ironclad warships. It was even inevitable. If that was the case, the demand for iron ore would be huge. It was like a bottomless pit. Ouyang Shuo could not guarantee that the counties that he conquered in the future would have rich iron ore reserves. Therefore, the import of iron ore would become a necessity. It would be too late by the time the territories realized the shortage of iron ore. Shanghai City had to be one step ahead. Ouyang Shuo immediately ordered the finance department to allocate a special fund to the War Preparedness Department every month to purchase iron ore from the market. At the same time, he signed iron ore purchase agreements with the major chambers of commerce. From then on, Shanghai City had to start stockpiling iron ore. For this, Ouyang Shuo ordered the construction of dozens of large iron ore storage warehouses in the eastern suburbs of Shanghai City to store iron ore purchased from the market or the chambers of commerce. The purchase of iron ore was not a small expenditure. In the market, 1 unit of iron ore cost 120 copper coins. It was more than 6 times the price of food. One could imagine the burden on the territory's finances if they purchased iron ore in large quantities. Even so, Ouyang Shuo had to grit his teeth and resolutely carry out this strategy. Other than importing iron ore, there was actually another way, which was to plunder. Other than other places, there was a huge island in the Southern Ocean called Australia. In reality, Australia was a major iron ore exporter. In the game, with Gaia's strict settings, it was bound to be the same. As long as they occupied Australia, the territory would not have to worry about iron ore no matter how much it expanded. Unfortunately, the current Shanghai City was still too weak. It was not strong enough to start a war. After the game map was expanded by 10 times, the whole of Australia was more like a piece of land than an island. Ouyang Shuo did not know how Gaia had set up Australia. At the very least, it would not be a barbaric island like Jingzhou Island. It was obvious how difficult it would be to conquer Australia. In the medium term, he could consider opening up iron ore trade with Australia. The ultimate goal was, of course, to take over the entire Australia. To be continued. Chapter 449. August 12th, Tianshuang County. Inside the hall, the Southern Alliance members were discussing. Alliance leader, the first batch of rations has arrived at Tianshuang County. Should we continue to wait for the rations, or? What do you all think? Buddha, he did not reply directly, but looked at his allies. Although Buddha, he already had a plan, he did not want to give his allies a bad impression of him being an autocrat. A few days ago, he had already acted on his own, and it was not appropriate for him to do so again. I think that it is better to wait for the rations to be gathered, and then do it in one go. This was a prudent leader. I disagree. The Alliance army took down Tianshuang County in a thunderous manner. At this time, we should immediately head south and seek a decisive battle. This was a radical leader. His voice was a notch higher, and when his words landed, it won a round of applause. Well said. As expected, there were many hot-blooded people everywhere. The current rations can only last for a week. What should we do if we run out? Once the 200,000-strong army moves out, there will be no turning back. We should be cautious. The prudent leader was not in a hurry. His words were sincere. That makes sense. We cannot be rash. Another round of applause. These people, do they even have a standpoint? This is not being rash. Blindly seeking stability will only delay the battle. The Shanghai City army is not easy to deal with. It is reported that the commander of the enemy army is the god of slaughter, Bai Qi. The Song family people have escaped again, and now they must know that Tianshuang County has been conquered. If we wait any longer, the enemy will have already prepared a countermeasure, and it will be too late. The 3,000 cavalry that followed the Song family returned to Tianshuang County that night. Needless to say, they did not find anything. At this moment, the Song family people had most likely reached the command center of the Shanghai City Army. The atmosphere in the hall became silent. Regardless of whether it was the prudent leader or the hot-blooded leader, all of them frowned, their expressions solemn. The name of the god of slaughter, Bai Qi, was truly terrifying. In the Battle of Chongping, the Battle of Lianzhou, the Battle of Laizhou, and the Battle of Jiulu, Bai Qi was the main character and the commander of the army. The name of the god of slaughter had spread throughout the China region. In the face of this invincible god of slaughter, no one had any confidence. Even if the Allied army was several times or even 10 times stronger than the Shanghai City Army, no one dared to say that they were completely confident in their victory. From the looks of it, the path of prudence seemed safe, but it was actually a dead end. Sometimes, the path of the mean was nothing more than a narrow path. Attack! Attack! The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became lively, and the voices of people asking to fight could be heard without end. In the end, the Southern Alliance members came to a consensus. They had to attack and use speed to fight slow. Seeing this, Buddha he smiled slightly and said, "In that case, the army will rest for a day and prepare all the supplies. Tomorrow morning, the entire army will break camp and head south." "Yes, sir." All the members responded loudly. Thinking about the upcoming battle, they were both afraid and excited. After the meeting, the entire Tianshuang County became lively. In addition to the 200,000 Allied troops stationed in Tianshuang County, over the past few days, more than a dozen lords from the north of Zhaoqing County had also led their troops to Tianshuang County through teleportation portals or on foot. In the end, the number of Allied troops stationed in Zhaoqing County reached 100,000. Different from the Southern Alliance members, the lords of Zhaoqing County had sent out all their forces. They were too clear that they could only win this battle and not lose. Once they lost, no matter how many troops were left in their territory, it would be useless. Rather than that, they might as well give it their all. Thus, the small Tianshuang County had 300,000 troops stationed there. The barracks in the city were already filled with people. The various armies simply set up camp outside the city. Many tents dyed the outskirts of the city white. It was a spectacular sight. Inside and outside the city, on the streets and alleys, there were valiant soldiers dressed in armor and wielding spears. The commoners in the city, other than the old, weak, women and children, were basically all sent to the grain transport team to transport rations for the army. On the official road to Tianshuang County, there was an endless stream of carriages transporting rations with no end in sight. To increase the speed, the grain transport officers in charge of transporting rations would not be stingy with the whips in their hands. The granaries in the city were once again cleared out and once again filled to the brim with white rice. When the order to fight was given, the entire city woke up. The soldiers who were still wandering outside received the order to return to their respective camps and report. The troops transporting rations, arrows, and other resources did not wait until the next day, and had already set off. PFO had allocated 30,000 troops to be stationed in Tianshuang County in charge of transporting rations. He was too clear, once the rations were robbed, what would happen to the Alliance army. Although all of the lords in the north of Zhaoqing County had gathered. But with Yifo's suspicious personality, he was still not at ease. If any of the lords betrayed them and secretly joined Shanghai City, it would be a nightmare for the Alliance army. Think about how Tianshuang County was captured. PFO did not dare confirm whether or not Shanghai City would return the favor. Thus, he had to be on guard. The main target was naturally the Alliance Army's main logistical base, Tianshuang County. Other than that, all of the large territories in Zhaoqing County were on guard. The only thing that made HFO feel uneasy was that the lords of Zhaoqing County had basically mobilized all of their field troops, and the rest were either city defense troops or reserve troops. If Shanghai City really launched a sneak attack, the various territories would not be able to defend. The problem was, firstly, HFO could not reject the good intentions of the lords, and secondly, he could not reject the 100,000 troops. In truth, with just 200,000 troops, HFO did not have much confidence. But with the 100,000 Allied army, the situation was completely different. HFO had the confidence to fight against Shanghai City. He did not believe that with his army 10 times that of the enemy, as long as he did not make any big mistakes, they could still lose. That night, HFO tossed and turned. His mind was constantly thinking about how to react if Shanghai City's army suddenly appeared in the north of Zhaoqing County. The entire night, HFO did not sleep well. When he woke up in the morning, HFO washed his face with cold water with dark circles under his eyes and finally made up his mind. He decided that from the Alliance Army and Allied Army, he would take 25,000 elite cavalry to form 50,000 iron cavalry and be in charge of patrolling the north of Zhaoqing County and guarding the rear. In the morning, the members of the Southern Alliance and the lords of the Alliance Army had their final meeting. During the meeting, HFO expressed his worries. Towards HFO's suggestion, some people did not agree, while others were extremely moved. The first to express their support were naturally the lords of Zhaoqing County. In truth, they were also feeling uneasy about going out in full force. In the Battle of Thunder Prefecture, didn't the lords of Thunder Prefecture fight with all their might, but in the end, their bases were destroyed by the Shanghai City Army? To have a group of iron cavalry patrolling the area, they felt more at ease. Seeing that the members of the Southern Alliance could not directly object, and the matter was settled. Like that, other than the 30,000 soldiers and 50,000 iron cavalry of Tianshuang County, the actual army that was sent out was only 220,000. Even so, it was still an extremely large number. The 220,000 strong army naturally could not break camp at the same time. The 50,000 cavalry would act as the vanguard unit and set off first. In the middle would be the main army formed by the 100,000 strong army. Finally, the 70,000 infantry and cavalry mixed together would act as the rear army and would be responsible for escorting the rations. The vast army left Tianshuang County, and like a black dragon, they headed south. A monstrous war had begun. The moment the army set off, the Black Snake Guards intelligence station in Tianshuang County received the news. An unassuming hummingbird soared into the sky and disappeared into the blue sky. The Alliance had occupied Tianshuang County, so naturally they had to clean it up. The Bank of the Four Seas was the main target. Times were different now. The Bank of the Four Seas was not only famous within the Shanghai Alliance, but the entire China region knew of its existence. Buddha, he, and the rest were no exception. As to how to deal with the Bank of the Four Seas, the Southern Alliance had some internal differences. The reason was that after searching the entire Bank of the Four Seas, not a single copper coin was found. Anyone with eyes knew that the funds of the Bank of the Four Seas must have been taken away by the Song family. What was left in Tianshuang County? Other than a building, there was a shopkeeper and 20 workers. According to Ruan Ping, he naturally wanted to kill them all to vent his anger. Some of the lords of Zhaoqing County had the same view. Buddha, he, however, had a different view. To him, killing the shopkeeper and workers to vent his anger was too low class and also harmful. Killing a few workers was not a loss to Shanghai City. If there was a loss, it would just be a loss of face. That was Ruan Ping's intention. But after venting his anger, what was left would be endless trouble, big trouble. Buddha, he knew himself. He knew that even if the Alliance won this battle, they would not be able to shake the foundations of Shanghai City. Shanghai City's main camp, Lianzhou County, including Cheongzhou County, was still as stable as Mount Tai. No one would be arrogant enough to think that they could defeat the world's #1 overlord in a single battle. Therefore, Buddha, he had to consider the situation after the battle. To him, the best outcome would be for both sides to negotiate. Shanghai City would give up on the Southern Ridge Province, and the Southern Alliance would not take another step forward. At the end of the day, the Southern Alliance was just the Southern Ridge Province. Therefore, in the future, the Southern Alliance would have to deal with Shanghai City. Just like that, if they were to completely fall out with Shanghai City just to vent their anger, it would not be worth it, and it was not a wise move. Taking over Tianshuang County was a war, and no one could say anything about the methods used. But if they won, and still wanted to kill the workers of the Bank of the Four Seas. That was not right. If it was him, Buddha, he would definitely not let it go. Because of that, Buddha, he suppressed the opinions of Ruan Ping and the rest, and only monitored the Bank of the Four Seas, and did not make any further moves. Needless to say, Buddha He's actions had saved his life in the future. To be continued. Chapter 450. Zhaoqing County, Songqing County. On the 14th of August, Zhao Yin led the Lijiao County Garrison Division and arrived at Songqing County on time. Along with the Garrison Division, there was also a large amount of rations and military supplies. If they were not escorting supplies, the Garrison Division would have arrived a day earlier. After Zhao Yin took charge of the Lijiao County Garrison Division, he did not slack off. Other than cooperating with the government to arrest bandits, clean up bandits, and suppress resistance, Zhao Yin did not slack off on the daily training of the division. The Marquis's kindness was as deep as the mountains and as deep as the sea. From an ordinary soldier, he was promoted to the position of division commander. If he did not produce any results, the hurdle in Zhao Yan's heart would not pass. This iron-blooded man had an innate love for the military. Usually, Zhao Yin trained his troops to the point of death. He took what he learned in the Special Forces training base and copied it to the Garrison Division, executing it meticulously. According to Zhao Yin, although the Garrison Division was a local garrison, they could not humiliate themselves. They must be trained according to the standards of the field army and be ready to go to the battlefield at any time. After a series of drills, the soldiers of the Garrison Division naturally complained incessantly. But even though they were complaining, the respect the soldiers had for division commander Zhao Yin grew with each passing day. Other than those who were waiting to die, in the military, there was no man who was willing to be lower than others. The soldiers of the Garrison Division were the same as the field army. They were all reorganized from prisoners of war. They all had the same background. Why could they enter the field army, enjoy higher pay, and be equipped with better equipment? They were not satisfied. The men of the Garrison Division were suppressing a wave of energy in their hearts. They trained hard every day and night and tested the results of their training by suppressing bandits, desperately trying to improve their respective ranks and combat strength. It was all for the day when they could return to the main battlefield and hold their heads up high. Hard work does not depend on heart. Now, the opportunity had come. When they received the military order, the entire division was excited. The training of the Lijiao County Garrison Division was not much worse than the field army. Although the division's combat strength could not compare to the field army, it was comparable to the Allied army. That day, Bai Qi inspected the Lijiao County Garrison Division outside the city. A rare smile appeared on Bai Qi's face. After receiving the general's affirmation, all the soldiers of the Garrison Division were even more fired up. Not only were they not afraid of the upcoming battle, but they were also filled with anticipation. Recently, the Military Affairs Office had begun to formulate a military merit system. Lin Yi and the other generals' titles were Ouyang Shua's first attempt at rewarding military merits. In the future, the recipients of rewards would be expanded from regiment commanders to brigade commanders, battalion commanders, and even platoon leaders and squad leaders. Those who performed meritorious deeds would be rewarded. The military office had already spread the news that the military merit system would be officially implemented in the Battle of Zhaoqing. Although the situation had changed drastically in this battle, it was a good opportunity for a good man to make a name for himself. Needless to say, this rumor was quietly released by Du Ruhui. In fact, how could Ouyang Shua, the sovereign, be spared from the formulation of the military merit system? Ouyang Shua was clearer than anyone about the specific progress. The first draft made by the Military Affairs Office was still on his desk, waiting to be reviewed. The establishment of the military merit system was not a trivial matter. Apart from the benefits of the military, there were also other related systems, such as the military rank system. The rewards for meritorious deeds were nothing more than money, military rank, and military rank. As for the title of nobility, Ouyang Shua did not have the authority to do so. Money was closely related to military expenditure, so it could not be decided on a whim. Once it was decided, it could not be changed at will. If it was set too high, and you would probably fight Duruhue to the death. The soldiers' pay was already envied by the common people. In addition to the rewards for meritorious deeds, if it was set too high, it might cause dissatisfaction in other industries, especially the civil officials. Setting it too low would not work either. After all, if there was no certain temptation, how could the soldiers risk their lives? Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, thought of a compromise. That was to appropriately lower the monetary reward and appropriately supplement it with military rank as an honorary reward. In fact, for generals above the rank of battalion commander, the temptation of honor was far greater than money. Didn't they see how many generals were envious when Lin Yi was conferred the title of Tiger General? Therefore, to formulate the military merit system, the military rank system must also be formulated. How could the various issues in between be settled in a short period of time? Obviously, Duruhue had put up a smokescreen. Duruhue's move was also to boost the morale of the soldiers on the front line. Her original intention was good, so Ouyang Shuo did not object. He only urged the military office to perfect the system before the end of the battle. Ouyang Shuo could not break his promise to the soldiers. When Duruhue received the news, he frowned and begged Marquis for mercy. Unfortunately, Marquis was indifferent. What was this called? Shooting himself in the foot. Since Marquis had already given the order, the entire military office could only stay up all night to pay attention to the frontline battle, while speeding up the establishment of the military merit system. As a last resort, Duruhue even thickened his face and went to the military martial arts hall to borrow people. Otherwise, he really would not be able to handle it. Fortunately, War Saint Sun Wu was easy to talk to, and he transferred more than 10 instructors to the military office to deal with the emergency. The next day, the news of the Alliance's southward movement reached the headquarters. The Alliance's southward movement once again exceeded Bai Qi's expectations, at least a week earlier than he had expected. They were really impatient. Inside the tent, Bai Qi stared at the map of Zhaoqing County, deep in thought. On the map, the 3 places where the Shanghai city's troops were stationed were marked in red. They were Yaogu County in the west, where the Left Army was stationed, Songqing County in the middle, and Gunlo County in the east, where the Right Army was stationed. Songqing, Yaogu, and Gunlo counties formed a triangle. Yaogu County and Gunlo County were less than 200 kilometers away from the headquarters to Songqing County. If the army marched quickly, they could reach them in 2 days. Above the 3 red dots was Tianchuan County. A thick black arrow stretched from Tianchuan County all the way to Songqing County. The Alliance's early southward movement forced Bai Qi to make a choice. Should he continue to defend the 3 counties, or should he gather the entire army in Songqing County to defend against the enemy together? Bai Qi's eyes never left the map for the entire morning. In the afternoon, military orders were sent to all the divisions through the relay stations. Obviously, Bai Qi had already made his decision. The general ordered the 4th Division of the Dragongxiang Legion and the Liizhou County Guard Division stationed in Songqing County to move to Yaogu County. The 2nd Division of the Dragongxiang Legion stationed in Yaogu County immediately left Yaogu County after the handover. They took a detour to the outskirts of Gunlo County, where they hid and awaited further orders. As a result, the troops in Yaogu County and Gunlo County were strengthened. Only Songqing County, which was the headquarters, was left with the incomplete Tianchuan County Guard Division. Could this be Director Bai Qi's empty city stratagem? The military order specifically mentioned that the 3 cities must erect the general's flag at the top of the city walls. Songqing County naturally had the flag of General Bai Qi. Yaogu County had the flag of General Xianwei Mu Guiying. Lastly, Gunlo County had the flag of General Han Exine. There was no doubt that Bai Qi had set up a trap. As for whether the alliance would fall for it, they would have to wait until they arrived at the battlefield to find out. August 15th, Shanghai City. Just as the battlefield of Zhaoqing was engulfed in smoke, Shanghai City welcomed an important figure. Confucius, the great sage, had brought his disciples to Shanghai City on a study tour. Just the day before, Han Fizi of the Legalism School had also quietly arrived at Shanghai City. The leaders of the Legalism School and Confucianism School had finally gathered at Shanghai City. Everyone knew that the Zhengming Assembly was about to enter the most exciting phase, the Zhengming Assembly. In this half a month, the scholars followed the arrangements of the Zhengming Assembly. They first went to the library and secluded themselves for a week, studying hard to understand the development and achievements of the various schools and sects in different dynasties. It had to be said that they had benefited greatly. This was especially so for the Confucian school. The study of scriptures had undergone several major developments in the future. Next, they moved to the lecture room. All the schools and sects could go up to the lecture room to expound on their own theories and ideas. The prerequisite was that the content of the exposition had to be innovative. If they still maintained their previous ideas, then there was no need for them to go up to the lecture room. What attracted the most attention was Wei Yang's speech. As one of the representatives of the Legalism School, as well as the person who deeply influenced the Warring States period and even the founder of the unification of the Qin dynasty, Wei Yang went up to the lecture room to expound on the new ideas of the Legalism School. The experience of Shanghai City was undoubtedly a huge blow to Wei Yang. Many of his previous ideas were revised, or rather, they were guided according to the situation. Historically, Wei Yang had implemented the strategy of farming in the Qin dynasty. The commoners could either farm or become soldiers. There was no third choice. Everything was for the sake of war. Emphasizing agriculture and restraining commerce was Wei Yang's national policy. The harsh punishment was Wei Yang's whip. Everything in Shanghai City was attacking Wei Yang's fixed views. The development of Shanghai City's business made Wei Yang dizzy. Interestingly, Shanghai City's agriculture was also flourishing. The parallel development of agriculture and commerce did not seem to contradict each other. The thinking of this great legalist had already changed. Of course, the core idea of the rule of law was still as firm as a rock. What had changed were the methods, the strategies, and the specific execution methods. What had not changed was the foundation of the rule of law. Without a doubt, Wei Yang's speech won everyone's applause. Mencius, Xuanzi, and the other scholars of the Confucian school who were listening quietly left with solemn expressions. The next day, Mencius went up to the lecture room. Interestingly, Mencius's speech was actually about the ethical relationship between the natives and the mutants, and then extended to the issue of the legitimacy of the mutant lords. It had to be said that Gaia had really created a group of monsters. This was definitely a compliment. Think about it. Mencius and the others were the representatives of the wise in history. Now, they were given 5,000 years of basic memories, and they were in a magnificent maelstrom of the game world. With that, how could they not be strengthened? The first confrontation between the Confucian school and the legalist school ended in a draw. To be continued. Chapter 451. Han Fei and Laozi came to Shanghai City one after the other, but their encounters were different. Let's talk about Han Fei, who came a day earlier. After Han Fei came to Shanghai City and paid a visit to the Great Duke, he was dragged to Wei Yang's mansion by Wei Yang, Shun Buhai, and Shenju. During this time, Shun Buhai and Shenju did not live in the Jushin Pavilion, but in Wei Yang's mansion. The four legalists had finally gathered. If there were outsiders present, they would be surprised, because the four of them did not talk about how to defeat the Confucians in the contest, but about the path of legalism. Obviously, in their eyes, the path of legalism was far more important than this debate. Han Fei, the master of the collection of legalism, met the three sects, and there were endless sparks. After all, Han Fei could only sort out and integrate the theories of the three sects according to written records. It was inevitable that there would be mistakes or misunderstandings. It was not as real as face-to-face communication. When the four met, they really regretted not meeting each other earlier. As they chatted, they forgot about themselves. It was not until their stomachs were growling that they looked at each other and smiled. "Great, great!" Wei Yang laughed and ordered the maids to bring the prepared food directly to the study. The four did not forget to talk while eating. According to the rules of the ancients, don't talk when eating, don't talk when sleeping. The four had long forgotten this set of rules when they were in high spirits. When they drank some Three Flowers wine, they became even more unrestrained and happy. After a quick lunch, the four chatted again. This conversation lasted for the whole day, and they completely forgot the passage of time. It was enough to have one confidant in life. Although the four legalists had different opinions, they were true confidants. At night, Han Fei naturally stayed in Wei Yang's mansion. It was also a coincidence that the next day, Confucius brought his disciples to Shanghai City. As soon as Confucius entered the city, he went directly to the Southwest University China Hall to pay a visit to the Great Duke, Jiang Shang. Confucius advocated restoring the ancient ways, yearned for the Western Zhou dynasty, and respected the Zhou rights. Although the leader of the Zhou rights was not Jiang Shang, but Zhou Gongdan, Jiang Shang was still one of the founders of the Western Zhou dynasty and was worthy of Confucius's visit. Confucius, the cultural giant, the most holy sage, was unusually modest in his words and actions. He was a true modest gentleman, the model of all the scholars in the world. The pedantic Confucians, hypocrites, and so on of the later generations had really brought shame to the founder, Confucius, and should not be confused with them. Following the appearance of Confucius, Laozi, Zhuangzi, Mozi, and the others also appeared from their hiding places. An unprecedented cultural event ushered in the most brilliant moment. Seeing that the time was ripe, Jiang Shang, the Grand Master of the 100 Schools of Thought, unexpectedly invited Confucius, Laozi, Mencius, Zhuangzi, Mahist, Han Fizi, and the others to his place of seclusion, Meteor Island. Before this, Jiang Shanka had always received the various students in the library. It was obvious that the conversation this time would be different. One had to know that those who were invited by the Grand Duke were the leaders of the various clans and sections. They were the most outstanding existences among the various schools of thought. The only one who fell indignant was probably Lu Buwei. That was because Lu Buwei wasn't on the invitation list. After all, Lu Buwei hadn't even received the title of, so he couldn't be considered a true grandmaster. The gathering of all the saints on Meteor Island was passed down as a legend by later generations. Outsiders had no way of knowing the specifics of the conversation. Even Ouyang Shuo, the host, knew nothing about it. It wasn't until noon that Jiang Shang sent a message to Xiao He, informing him that the Zhengming assembly would officially be held the next day. There was also a small piece of paper that was sent out of the island. In the afternoon, Ouyang Shuo summoned the 4 bureau chiefs to the main hall of the protectorate for a meeting. Other than the 4 bureau chiefs, Minister Xiao He and one of the representatives of the school of vertical and horizontal, Zhang Yi, also appeared in the hall. There were 2 matters to be discussed. The first was the establishment of the diplomatic agency of the Protectorate of Southern Border, and the second was the matter of the Zhengming assembly to be held the next day. After Fan Zhongyin's suggestion, they finally decided to follow the old system and name the diplomatic agency of the territory the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. The Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was to spread praises and guide etiquette. The head of the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies and was in charge of all diplomatic affairs. Zhang Yi, who had just become an official, was naturally appointed as the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. The established Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was not under the jurisdiction of the 4 bureaus. Instead, it reported directly to the Protector General of Southern Border, Ouyang Shuo. The rank of the Office of a Chamberlain of Dependencies was between the Bureau Chief and Bureau Chief of the Protectorate. The basic officials of the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies were transferred from the Bureau of Culture and Education of the Administrative Bureau. The Bureau of Culture and Education was in charge of the territory's etiquette and had the same responsibility as the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Thus, the officials transferred from the Bureau of Culture and Education under Zhang Yi's guidance would soon be able to operate the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. In addition, Ouyang Shuo also authorized Zhang, to select the elites from the scholars of the school of vertical and horizontal and recruit them into the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Everything would be decided by Zhang Yi himself. Seeing this, Zhang Yi naturally shed tears of gratitude. "Thank you for your trust, Marquis." The moment the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was established, Ouyang Shuo heard the system's announcement. System announcement. The representative of the school of vertical and horizontal, Zhang Yi, has become an official in the Shanghai territory. He is now in charge of the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies and has accepted disciples. At the same time, he has fulfilled the 3 conditions for a school to establish itself. The school of vertical and horizontal has officially established itself in Shanghai City. System announcement. The school of vertical and horizontal of the 100 schools of philosophers has officially entered Shanghai City. Shanghai City is specially bestowed with the title Warping and Maneuvering as a reward. Congratulations to the player. Do not say you have no clothes. When the system announcement sounded, the other players of the China region did not have much of a reaction. Only He Fo and the others, who were still marching, had their expressions twitching. What was this? They were still fighting, and the other main character of the war was actually warping and maneuvering in their headquarters. Comparing oneself to others was really infuriating. The impact of this system announcement on He Fo and the others was truly greater than that of an army of thousands. Once the announcement came out, it undoubtedly mercilessly pulled He Fo and the others back to reality. It made them truly realize what kind of terrifying opponent they were about to challenge. Comparing the two, they were not even on the same level. If they were to personally go to war, how could they say they had no clothes, and yet they could still safely expand the influence of their territory in Shanghai City? To He Fo and the others, the 100 schools of philosophers was simply an extravagant hope. To Shanghai City, it was like eating a meal. One after another, the schools of thought entered Shanghai City. He Fo rode on his warhorse, secretly rejoicing in his heart. He was rejoicing that he had maintained enough calmness and rationality in the matter of the Bank of the Four Seas and did not do anything out of line. Facing such an opponent, anyone would have a headache. If possible, He Fo did not want to go against Shanghai City at all. But helplessly, the wilderness was just so cruel. There was no win-win situation at all, only the simplest and crudest survival of the fittest. Either you die, or I die. Since the path of retreat had been cut off, then it was time to forge ahead. He Fo's expression suddenly became firm, and he became braver the more he suffered. Ouyang Shuo did not have the mood to care about what He Fo and the others were thinking, and instead looked at the attributes of the title. Warping and maneuvering. Territory fame increased by 15, hostility towards territory decreased by 25, difficulty in foreign trade decreased by 20, favorability with different races increased by 30. Compared to military Holy Land, legalism Holy Land, and agronomy Holy Land, not only was the title unique, but its attributes were also different. The other 3 all had the same increase. Only the title of warping and maneuvering had 2 of the 4 attributes decreased. Thinking about it carefully, it was not difficult to find that the attributes of warping and maneuvering were not inferior to the other 3. The first attribute, increased territory fame, needless to say, was a very rare attribute and usually only appeared on hidden buildings. The reason why Shanghai City could attract so many talents was because of this attribute. Reduce hostility towards territory, and reduce difficulty in foreign trade. These 2 attributes looked like they were right, but they were not. They were not obvious now, and only in the later stages of the game would they show their shocking effects. Not to mention hostility, just talking about foreign trade, it was already a term that would cause people to fantasize. With this, Ouyang Shuo was even more confident about the iron or trade with the Australian region in the future. The last attribute, increased favorability with different races, was obviously beneficial to Ouyang Shuo's race strategy. In the territory, there were now 3 major foreign races: the mountain barbarians, the nomadic tribes, and the Li tribe. Other than the mountain barbarians, who voluntarily submitted, which was considered stable, the nomadic tribes and elite tribe were forced to submit through war, so the people of their tribe were more or less resistant to the territory. With warping and maneuvering, it was believed that the antagonism between the two sides would be greatly reduced, and it would also be of great help to Tian Wenjing's conciliatory policy in Xiongzhou County. Other than the existing foreign races, it would also be of great help to the future racial integration. Don't forget that there was a huge mountain barbarian tribe living in Chiyu City in Wuzhou County. Ouyang Shuo was previously worried that even if he conquered Chiyu City, the mountain barbarians in the city would not be willing to submit. After all, Chiyo's influence among the mountain barbarians was too great. With the enhancement of warping and maneuvering, there was at least a 30% chance of victory. Most importantly, the mountain barbarians of Chiyu City were not. It must be known that in Gaia's setting, the people of other regions were actually classified as different races. In this way, the meaning behind it was huge. It could be foreseen that with the enhancement of warping and maneuvering, if Shanghai City were to launch a national war in the future, its rule over the occupied territory would be much smoother than that of other territories. With this analysis, it was clear how powerful warping and maneuvering was. There was no doubt that the attribute of warping and maneuvering was mainly used in the middle and late stages of the game. It was really an extraordinary existence. This time, he really picked up a treasure. After Ouyang Shuo checked the attributes, he wondered if he should recruit the other representative of the school of vertical and horizontal, Su Qin, to prevent other territories from obtaining this title. Thinking of this, a cold light flashed in Ouyang Shuo's eyes. To be continued. Chapter 452. Ouyang Shuo retracted his thoughts and continued his discussion with the other officials. In tomorrow's Zhengming Assembly, apart from the Zhengming Assembly, there was another important ceremony, which was the Heaven Worship Ceremony. As the host, Ouyang Shuo would lead the scholars to worship the Yellow Emperor. Since the Yellow Emperor was the ancestor of China and the role model of Yan and Huang, it was only natural to worship him. After finalizing the matters of the assembly, Ouyang Shuo announced the end of the discussion. He left Xiao He behind so that he could contact Su Qin, another representative of the school of vertical and horizontal, to see if Su Qin was interested in becoming an official in Shanghai City. As the organizer of the Zhengming Assembly, apart from arranging the food and lodging, Xiao He also had an important task, which was to contact the scholars of the various sects and invite them to Shanghai City. Xiao He was both a famous minister and a talent scout. Ouyang Shuo believed that with Xiao He's help, Shanghai City would definitely be able to attract true talents. In the past half a month, the number of scholars who had agreed to become officials in Shanghai City was no less than 100. These people came from various sects and were suitable for all walks of life. Xiao He coordinated with the 4 departments to make appropriate arrangements for these scholars. At this time, Xiao He's identity as Pavilion Elder played a key role. In the territory, apart from Ouyang Shuo, only Xiao He had the authority to coordinate the personnel of the 4 departments. Through the Zhengming Assembly, Xiao He was slowly establishing his prestige in the territory. Everyone knew that it wasn't long before Xiao He replaced Fan Zhongyan as the head of the civil officials in the territory. Fan Zhongyan himself didn't mind. Wen Jinggong's character was truly unquestionable. Of the talents that Xiao He had recruited, those who were interested in entering the officialdom would either be directly appointed to the 4 major bureaus or be transferred to various counties. Those who had no intention of becoming officials would either become teachers at the Southwest University China Hall and the Military Martial Arts Hall, or enter various professions, serve as consultants, or form associations. One had to know that apart from the 9 schools of thought, the 100 schools of thought weren't famous. However, they were secretly inherited in various professions, such as carpentry, carving, tanner, lacquer, embroidery, and so on. Shanghai City's trade associations sprung up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Previously, the main associations in Shanghai City were the Textile Association and the Fishery Association. In less than half a month, more than 10 associations had registered with the finance department. The more famous ones were the Carpentry Association, Embroidery Association, Carving Association, and Leather Association. In addition to setting up trade associations, some of the scholars were also highly skilled in their own trades. According to Xiaohe's calculations, there were 5 master-level technicians. By the time they were promoted to grandmaster level under the support of Shanghai City's special characteristics, Ouyang Shuo was already imagining the moment when Shanghai City's lifestyle professions would explode. Other than Ouyang Shuo, the members of the Falling Moon Society who had settled in Shanghai City were also very excited. These hidden successors of the major trades were all people that they wanted to take as their masters. If they were lucky, they might even receive a legacy quest and become the successor of a certain family or sect. If that happened, they would become incredibly powerful. For a moment, the members of the Falling Moon Society seemed to have gone crazy, shuttling through the streets and alleys. Among them, there was a lucky one called Ji Shui who actually triggered the woodcarving inheritance mission. Perhaps this lucky guy was too excited. He actually announced the news on the forum. This time, there was really an uproar. The profession players of the China server were burning with rage. The sect master of A Thread of Love received the news and directly teleported to Shanghai City. Lord Wui, you can't favor one and discriminate against the other. A Thread of Love and Falling Moon Society are both guilds under Shanghai City. It can't be that one is born and the other is adopted, can it? The cold beauty glanced at him coldly. If it were an ordinary person, he would have already laid down his arms and surrendered. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo was a seasoned veteran and had long since become unperturbed. He knew that if he really let the members of A Thread of Love run to Shanghai City and compete with the members of the Falling Moon Society for resources, he was afraid that Sun Xiaoya would immediately tear him to pieces. Sun Xiaoya was usually gentle like a little girl next door, but when she was angry, she was extremely terrifying. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shuo's heart shuddered. Lord Qing, it's not that I favor one and discriminate against the other. After all, Shanghai City is the registered place of the Falling Moon Society, and A Thread of Love is registered in Cliff Mountain City, isn't it? Hearing this, the love thread of Love's expression froze. She didn't expect this bastard to reject her without even thinking about it. Could it be that her charm has really declined too quickly recently? But all beauties who look cold on the outside were actually the most strong-willed. In the capital, the number of men who pursued the love thread of love could probably line up twice around the city walls of the capital. As for those pursuers, the love thread of love didn't even look at them, especially after the pursuit of the secret family's descendant, Star Zhichun. The love thread of love became colder and colder. Living in seclusion in Cliff Mountain City, there were basically no more wild bees and butterflies. Even so, it didn't mean that the love thread of love didn't like to be praised. It also didn't mean that she could stand a man ignoring her charm. For a woman, especially a beautiful woman, this was the most unforgivable thing. According to the modern saying, I can admire myself, but you can't turn a blind eye to me. However, the love thread of love couldn't do anything to Ouyang Shuo, who was the man in front of her. He was the #1 lord in the China region, and even the world, the existence at the peak among the players. His every word and action was the focus of the China region. Some people were jealous of him, some people admired him, and some people were afraid of him. But no one dared to be presumptuous towards him, because this was a man who was about to wield the power of the world. Thinking of this, the love thread of love became more and more depressed. In a moment of desperation, she could no longer control the little universe in her heart and completely exploded. I don't care, you have to help me. There was a hint of coquettishness in her words. Ouyang Shuo was dumbfounded when he heard this. Heavens, was this still the ice goddess he was familiar with? Ice goddess coquettishness? She was going to cause trouble. Seeing Ouyang Shuo's expression, the love thread of love then realized that she had lost control of herself, and her face instantly turned red. A touch of captivating red climbed onto her suet face, making her look extremely cute. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. In the air, There was even a faint hint of ambiguity. Ouyang Shuo calmed his mind. He knew that, at this time, he had to give the love thread of love a way out. Otherwise, this ice goddess would really flip out. Cough. How about this? Sect Master Love, thread of love, will arrange for 20 people to go to Shanghai City to be apprenticed to a master or accept a mission. As for whether they can trigger the inheritance mission, let's leave it to fate. What do you think? Okay. The love thread of love took a deep breath and did not dare to stay any longer. She turned around and left. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo also let out a long breath. She wanted to kill someone. Not long after this, Ouyang Shuo received a letter from Sun Xiaoye from Cliff Mountain City. When he opened it, it was a blank piece of paper. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo could not help but shake his head. This girl was quite scheming. Other than the unaffiliated cultivators, if a sect was stationed in Shanghai City and met the requirements, they could even open a branch in the Southwest University China Hall and widely accept disciples, just like the agricultural school. Once this news spread, even the major sects like the School of Moism were extremely tempted. After all, it was extremely tempting to be able to spread their theories in such an influential academy. Not to mention the Southwest University China Hall and the Jiangshan Library, these two powerful weapons. Even if the various sects did not set up a branch in Shanghai City, it was still feasible for them to open a branch in the Southwest University China Hall. The Southwest University China Hall, with its inclusive way of learning, gradually gained the recognition of many sections. The rise of the sect was right in front of them. After this battle, the cultural foundation of Shanghai City became even more solid. In the entire China region, there was no other sect that could compare. Hearing that the Marquis wanted him to invite Su Qin to become an official, Xiao He looked at the Marquis in surprise. Logically speaking, the newly established office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies should have Zhang Yi as the Chamberlain of Dependencies Chamberlain. Why did the Marquis want Su Qin? But Xiao He was deep in thought. Although he had doubts in his heart, he did not voice them and only nodded. After Xiao He left, Ouyang Shuo gazed at the blue sky of Shanghai City through the middle door of the hall, his mind uncertain. In a corner of the blue sky, a black cloud suddenly floated over. Su Qin, I hope you're smart enough not to make me take that last step. Southern Border Protectorate, Wuji Hall. The night was like water, the sound of frogs and cicadas lingered in the ears. The Wuji Hall was completely silent. Whether it was the guards patrolling the night or the maids holding the lanterns, they all walked quietly, afraid that they would disturb the master of the hall. The Wuji Hall was Ouyang Shuo's palace. When the Southern Border Protectorate was established, the entire palace complex had been expanded. The Ying sisters, as well as Bing'er, all had their own palaces. Bing'er was slowly growing up, and it was time for her to start living independently. As the system of Shanghai City became more complete, a hierarchical system was beginning to appear, although Ouyang Shuo did not want it. This was an ancient setting, and the development of matters could not be changed by his will. As the younger sisters of the Marquis, Yingyu and the others now had carriages accompanying them when they went out. The number of servants in the residence had also multiplied. The rules of the residence were also becoming stricter. The Bureau of Internal Affairs that had been established was playing an increasingly important role in the residence. Zisu did not disappoint and managed the rear hall in an orderly manner. Even Ouyang Shuo had not expected that Zisu, a girl, would have such talent. Whether it was the Ying sisters or Songjia, they all approved of Zisu. Although it had been expanded several times, the interior of the Wuji Hall was simple and unadorned. Although Ouyang Shuo was extremely wealthy and was no longer the poor boy of his previous life, he still did not like luxury. Due to Ouyang Shuo's influence, the entire Southern Border Protectorate was very simple. Within the palace, Ouyang Shuo took out a secret manual from his storage pouch. It was the killing sword mantra. After dispelling the jackdaw poison from his body, Ouyang Shuo adjusted his breathing for several days before preparing to officially cultivate this sword mantra. The killing sword was about to appear. To be continued. Chapter 453. Ouyang Shua placed his right hand on the front of the secret manual, and the system notification rang out. System notification. Congratulations to player, you have nothing for obtaining the Emperor rank killing sword scripture. Do you want to learn it? Learn it. The secret manual in his hand turned into a bloody light and shot into Ouyang Shua's forehead in the blink of an eye. In an instant, Ouyang Shua's mind was pulled into a blood-red battlefield. It was a red-setting sun, withered grass, and a cold sky. Even the air was filled with a thick smell of blood. Ouyang Shua felt like he had seen this scene before. The last thing he saw before his rebirth was this blood-red sky. The horizon in the distance was low and empty. On the battlefield, the war horses neighed, and the sounds of killing shook the sky. In the wilderness, on the black soil, two armies, one red and one black, were fighting. Looking closely, the numbers of the two armies were completely different. The Red Army was 4 times the Black Army. Even so, the battle on the battlefield was still evenly matched. This was all because of the peerless killing god that stood in the Black Army. In the Black Army, a middle-aged general with a blurry face attracted Ouyang Shua's attention. The middle-aged general wore chain armor and held a chain sword. Blood energy surged around him as he slaughtered his way through the chaotic army. The chain sword was made of fine iron. It was slender and thick, and the blade was covered in a thick blood energy. The sword flashed, and a head fell to the ground. The strange thing was that the middle-aged general seemed to be able to sense Ouyang Shua's gaze. His expression was cold as he raised his sword and started to practice sword techniques in the battle. First kill. The middle-aged general's tone was calm. The chain sword slashed forward and killed the enemy with a simple horizontal slash. Second kill, soldier. The chain sword that was slashed out didn't retract and followed up with a diagonal slash. A soldier on the opposite side didn't even have time to react, and his throat was slit. 3 kills, soldier. The middle-aged general killed people like flies and didn't show any change in expression. He was able to move freely in the chaotic army. The chain sword moved to the side and intercepted a soldier's scimitar. After blocking it, it quickly flicked the scimitar away, and before the soldier could react, it stabbed into the enemy's chest. The sharp chain sword pierced through the soldier's armor and the enemy's heart. For slaughtered generals, the soldier was dead, and the one who stood in front of the middle-aged general was a black-faced general of the enemy army. The black-faced general wore red armor and wielded a scimitar. His aura was extremely ferocious, and it was obvious that he was not someone to be trifled with. The middle-aged general's expression did not change. The chain sword in his hand became more and more devilish. The sword moves from before were just the most basic sword moves. When he deduced the 4th move, it had already given birth to all sorts of variations. Ouyang Shua's eyes were dazzled as he watched the long sword slash, and slash. The middle-aged general roared, and Qin Jian circulated his collapsing energy, directly breaking the enemy general's curved blade into 2. The black-faced general could not help but be shocked. While he was distracted, Qin Jian had already turned around and dealt a fatal blow. Ouyang Shua's blood couldn't help but boil as he watched. As expected of the killing sword technique, as expected of the sword technique for close combat on the battlefield, there was nothing fancy about each and every move. They were born to kill. Pentakill. The middle army's general started to practice the 5th move. Ouyang Shua was the most confused about this move. Was it suicide? It was too contradictory. As if he felt Ouyang Shua's confusion, the middle-aged general's lips curled into a strange smile. A smile appeared on his blurry face. It was as horrifying as it could be. Ouyang Shua felt a chill down his spine as he watched. The middle-aged general turned his sword around, and the tip of the sword instantly pierced towards his lower ribs. The long sword pierced through his body, and it did not stop, directly piercing through an enemy soldier behind the middle general. So that's how it was. Ouyang Shua suddenly understood. The so-called pentakill was to put oneself in a hopeless situation and then be reborn. In a hopeless situation, using the smallest price to exchange for the greatest killing power. For this move, One had to have a precise grasp of the timing of the sword strike and the position where the sword would be struck. Otherwise, if the enemy didn't die and he was one step ahead, wouldn't that be a waste? Pentakill. With a swoosh, the middle-aged general pulled out the long sword from his body. Blood splattered everywhere, but he did not even frown. Looking over, although the middle-aged general had displayed his might, the Black Army did not have the advantage in numbers. They were gradually being suppressed by the red tide and were about to be defeated. The middle-aged general sneered as he swept his sword across. It was an ordinary sweep, but it caused the world to change colors. There was a sudden clap of thunder in the silent sky. The sanguine aura that enveloped the divine sword tore through the sword, transforming into red sharp blades that claimed lives. In an instant, dozens of soldiers fell. Ouyang Shuo frowned when he saw this. He was puzzled. In his previous life, he was considered average among adventure-type players. He also had some insights into martial arts. The martial arts set by Gaia in the game were derived from real martial arts. Logically speaking, even if it was enhanced, it should not exceed the boundaries of the laws of physics. It should still be restricted by mechanics. He could not figure out the middle-aged general's move. How was this a sword move? It had reached a horrifying stage. The middle-aged general was able to use the sword's condensed killing aura to kill people invisibly. It was like the means of immortals. Wasn't killing with aura the means of immortals? Could it be that the deathly sword cannon was not a real manual and was just a setting of Gaia's game? That's not right. Gaia should not be so conflicted. Previously, Gaia had announced that any cannon or canon was definitely a real manual. As such, Ouyang Shuo could not figure it out. Or could it be that Gaia had already extrapolated martial arts to this stage? Thinking about it in this way was truly frightening. Unfortunately, the middle-aged general did not seem to have any intention of explaining in detail to Ouyang Shuo. At this stage, learning the sword move depended on the individual's perception. If he understood, he understood. If he did not understand, he would not understand even if he explained. Ouyang Shuo could only engrave the scene from before in his mind. 7. Slaughter Demon. The general did not stop. He cleared the surrounding enemies and charged with his sword, targeting the enemy's commander. All the enemies that stood in their way were killed one by one. Ouyang Shuo noticed that the middle-aged general was able to use the first 4 moves freely during the battle. Clearly, the path of the deathly sword was not a simple 7 moves. They could combine and adapt to the situation, giving rise to thousands of changes. It was enough for him to advance and retreat freely in a chaotic army. The deathly sword was a sword of the path of killing and also a sword of survival. To kill the enemy, one must first survive. This was an unbreakable truth since ancient times. Other than an assassin, no one would not know how to protect themselves. The deathly sword had done this to the extreme, because the deathly sword was the sword Tao of the battlefield. On the battlefield, swords and spears had no eyes. Attacks were everywhere. Hidden arrows were even harder to defend against. Surviving on the battlefield and protecting oneself was a profound art. The middle-aged general practiced the deathly sword to the extreme. Every move was a killing move, but it could also be instantly switched to a defensive move. He could switch between attack and defense freely like flowing water. The vast army could not stop the middle-aged general at all. Everywhere he passed, corpses were everywhere and blood flowed like a river. Quick, stop him! The enemy's commander was already panicking. Kill! The red wave did not fear death as it pounced towards the general in the middle. Countless scimitars formed rays of saber light that covered the sky and earth. They were densely packed, and there was nowhere to hide. Humph! The middle-aged general's expression did not change as he continued to move freely. The rows of enemies were not his match at all. From time to time, the general in the middle would use the common life kill to reap lives. Ouyang Shuo was fascinated by this. The more he looked, the more shocked he was. Logically speaking, Shi Wansui and Yi Lai were ferocious generals. Ouyang Shuo did not even see them, but they were so ferocious and dared to take the head of a general in the middle of an army of 10,000. Where did the Deathly Sword Sutra come from? Such a cultivation technique was only rated as an emperor-level cultivation technique. Ouyang Shuo wouldn't believe it even if he told him. What kind of secrets were hidden within? Ouyang Shuo did not have time to think too much as the middle-aged general had already charged in front of the enemy commander. With another sweep, the people in front of him were all killed. The enemy commander rode on a tall horse with a solemn expression. He was not an idiot, and the spear in his hand was ready to be unleashed. He was going to make his last stand. The general in the middle laughed coldly. With a pung, he jumped up from the flat ground. The sword in his hand stabbed forward, not bothering about the spear that was stabbing towards him. The devilish long sword was like a shooting star, slashing through the air and instantly stabbing into the enemy's chest. The enemy commander lowered his head in disbelief as he looked at the sharp blade in front of his chest. The spear in his hand brushed past the body of the general in the middle before falling to the ground powerlessly. At the crucial moment, the sword of the general in the middle was a step faster. The essence of this move was in the word fast. Ouyang Shuo's eyes were filled with fascination as he watched. The so-called ghost god kill naturally did not kill real ghosts or gods, but the enemy commander on duty. The entire Deathly Sword Sutra was designed for the battlefield. Every move was targeted at the enemy on the battlefield. No wonder there would be such a description in the evaluation, Deathly Sword Sutra. The Qin army used the Qin sword on the battlefield to refine a peerless sword technique. Such a sword Dao was worthy of the word peerless. The enemy commander was killed, and everyone was in an uproar. They all rushed forward and wanted to tear the body of the middle-aged general into pieces. The general in the middle jumped off his warhorse and slashed the air with his long sword. The red light became more and more devilish. He raised his head and looked at Ouyang Shuo for the last time. He coldly spat out 4 words, 100-mile butcher. Ouyang Shuo's heart trembled. This was the ultimate move of the Deathly Sword Sutra. The red light on the body of the sword seemed to have absorbed enough blood energy from the body of the enemy commander. In an instant, a huge amount of blood energy burst out and turned into hundreds and thousands of small red swords. Silence. The entire battlefield was instantly silent. Hundreds of soldiers were killed in an instant. Bug, this is a bug. Ouyang Shuo exclaimed at his heart. 100-mile butcher. Once the Deathly Sword Sutra is unleashed, there will be no one within a 100-mile radius. Ouyang Shuo originally thought that this sentence was just for show. He did not expect that it was actually true. 100-man butcher, Ouyang Shuo muttered to himself. To be continued. Chapter 454. The killing sword was a sword that killed. Once the sword was unsheathed, it would drink human blood. Otherwise, it would never return to its sheath. After the middle-aged general finished speaking, the entire blood-red illusion suddenly collapsed and turned into a bubble. Ouyang Shuo slowly opened his eyes, his mind still reflecting on the sword technique just now. At this moment, the system notification rang out. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has no clothes. Excellent aptitude, strong comprehension. Received guidance from the blood-red illusion. Cultivation of Slayer Sword Mantra has reached first glimpse. The sudden appearance of the blood-red illusion, the inexplicable comprehension. By now, Ouyang Shuo was sure that the Slayer Sword Mantra contained a huge secret. Other cultivation techniques did not have this, including the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor and the Yang family spear scripture that Ouyang Shuo practiced before. None of them had this illusion. System notification. Player who says that has no clothes. Insufficient comprehension. 7 kills. Life kill is temporarily sealed. System notification. Player who says that has no clothes. Insufficient comprehension. 7 kills. Ghost God kill is temporarily sealed. System notification. Player who says that has no clothes. Insufficient comprehension. Ultimate skill, 100-mile massacre, is temporarily sealed. The 3 consecutive system notifications made Ouyang Shuo even more speechless. He checked his personal attributes. With the help of the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, His comprehension had reached a terrifying 32 points. Even so, it still indicated that his comprehension was insufficient. In fact, in the Blood Red Illusion, just now, Ouyang Shua did not know much about the last 2 kills and ultimate skills of the 7 kills. He could only slowly experience and comprehend it in the future. Taking this opportunity, Ouyang Shua checked his complete personal attributes. Name, who says that has no clothes. Title, Lord, increases favorability of historical characters by 45, increases success rate of historical characters by 20, territory, Southern Protectorate, occupation, general, part-time, level 70 achievement, 2, 62 million/1 million title, first-class marquis, Lianzhou marquis, reputation, outstanding reputation, 1, 73 million/1 million, true essence, 710/2000 aptitude, 39 comprehension, 32 fortune, 8 charm, 10 commander, 80 martial power, 75 intelligence, 27 politics, 65 talent, 1. God of War permanently increases combat power by 20, talent 2. Ice, attacks have an ice attribute. Characteristics, Demon God's Possession, increases combat power by 200, lasts for half an hour, inflicts a weakened state. Characteristics, Emperor's Way, increases heaven's perception, gives rise to the might of an emperor. Mental cultivation method, Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor, Qi Nurturing Chapter, level 8/level 12. Cultivation techniques, 8 Extremes Fist Scripture, Mastery, Yang Family Spear Scripture, Mastery, Killing Sword Scripture, First Glimpse, Technique, Shadow, Technique, Ascended, Art of War, 6 Secret Strategies, Wu Tao Volume, Technique, King Technique, Frowny Face Mount, Green Lightning, Green Beetle Horse King, Weapon, Demonic Spear, Divine Weapon, Scarlet Knight Sword, Divine Weapon, God, Purple Gold, God, Cape, God, Special Items, Yin Yang Copper Coin, North Bay Treasure Map with Ouyang Shua's current attributes. Even among adventurer players, he stood at the very top. The only thing missing from the equipment column was probably a pair of boots. A few days earlier, Ouyang Shua had given the Beast King scales that Song Jia had collected to Qing. His request was to use these scales to sew 2 inner armors and 2 pairs of boots. The little girl, on the other hand, was very confident. She had been staying in the tailor's shop for the past few days. According to the progress, it should be finished soon. It was late at night, but Ouyang Shua didn't feel sleepy at all. He got up and drew his Scarlet Knight sword. Shua, the red sword light, was unsheathed. In the dim light of the night, it looked even more noble and unadorned. Ouyang Shua brandished the crimson firmament sword in his hand and started dancing in the room. Every move he made was precisely the 7 slaughter sword that he had just comprehended. He danced very slowly, and as he danced, he recalled. From time to time, he would stop to close his eyes and meditate. In Ouyang Shua's hands, the sword move that was originally filled with killing intent didn't have the slightest bit of killing intent. If there had been an expert there, they would have been astonished. That was because Ouyang Shua's sword moves seemed to be light and soft, but in fact he had already mastered the essence of sword moves. The seemingly clumsy sword moves were actually filled with killing intent. After a while, Ouyang Shua sheathed his sword. In such a short time, he was already sweating and his face was pale. Killing sword, Ouyang Shua murmured to himself. A gentle breeze blew across the quiet night. Only a sigh could be heard. The dark night faded away. A red sun slowly rose from the mountains in the east. The golden sunlight gently sprinkled on the Shanghai city that was surrounded by mountains, waking up this giant beast. Outside the city, in the dim light of the night, farmers were pushing wheelbarrows or carrying poles, carrying fresh vegetables and fruits that had just been plucked from the vegetable fields or from the orchards into the city to be sold. As soon as the city gate opened, the farmers lined up and entered the city in an orderly manner, disappearing into the streets and alleys. In the city, hundreds of markets of various sizes opened at the same time, and it was bustling with noise and excitement. The Friendship River was the market of the various chambers of commerce. It occupied the largest area and had the most variety of goods. There were all kinds of goods from the 9 king cities. Naturally, it was the most bustling place. On the riverside of the canyon, the pier was packed with people. Countless merchant ships were docked at the pier, waiting to unload their goods. Some were preparing to load the specialties of Shanghai City onto the merchant ships and sell them to various places. There were thousands of porters coming and going at the pier. The streets of the city were already crowded with horses and carriages. The sound of children reading could be faintly heard from the private schools on both sides of the street. Today, there were no less than 100 private schools in Shanghai City, and they could be seen everywhere. Some are funded by the Department of Culture and Education, some are funded by Shanghai City, and some were donated by the aristocrats and merchants. This was the reason why Shanghai City's literary style was flourishing. Who could be sure that there wouldn't be any important officials or famous scholars coming out of these private schools in the future? The young wives who woke up early were dressed prettily. They carried a basket and went to the market to buy seasonal vegetables. Along the way, they would also buy 2 bags of steamed buns from the breakfast shop as breakfast for the whole family. When they saw their familiar neighbors, they would stand on the street and chat a little. The price of vegetables, the style of hairpins, and the material of clothes could all become topics of conversation. With the beautiful young wives around, they could also chat about cosmetics and whatnot. The atmosphere of Shanghai City had always been grand and majestic. They wouldn't be harsh on women, especially the rise of a group of women like Cui Yingyu, Mu Lanyue, and Mu Ging, which pushed the status of women in Shanghai City to the peak. That was why these young wives could be so unbridled. There were also young and old men who came to the breakfast shop together, drinking sweet soy milk and eating steaming hot steam buns. They chatted about the news and gossip in the neighborhood, feeling very comfortable. Occasionally, there would also be well-informed people who would talk about the gossip of the protectorate. The little princess was naughty at school. She took advantage of her teacher's afternoon nap to draw a little turtle on his face. The housekeeper of the protectorate, Miss Zissou, took a liking to Cui Hua and recruited her as a third-class maid. She immediately rose from a sparrow to a phoenix, bringing glory to her entire family. A servant didn't abide by the rules and stole a vase from the protectorate to sell. When he was found out, not only was he immediately dismissed, but he was also sent to the Punishment Bureau for investigation. He couldn't avoid going to jail. In the backyard of the protectorate, there's an amusement park and a strange castle. Anything that was related to the protectorate would become a hot topic of gossip among the common people. The biggest topic of the day was naturally the Zhengming conference that was going to be held today. The common people naturally didn't know much about the 100 schools of philosophers. However, the officials attached great importance to the event, and it was a grand event. Scholars could be seen coming and going in the city. I heard that 4 or 5 of the 100 schools of philosophers have decided to enter Shanghai City. What 4 or 5? I think there are at least 10 of them. That's right. There's no place more suitable than our Shanghai City. I really want to go to the royal city to broaden my horizons. What do you think the royal city is like? The one who spoke was clearly a refugee who had just arrived. Ever since the merger of the 3 cities, the royal city had become a forbidden zone for the common people. Speaking of which, I've been there before. I even stayed there for a period of time. The one who spoke was an old man. Even though he was in his 50s, his body was still strong and healthy. Elder Zhang, you've really been there before. Can you tell us more about it? The people at the table immediately crowded around the old man. Even the people at the neighboring tables craned their necks over with curiosity in their eyes. When old man Zhang saw this, he smiled faintly and said, "You young lads, you came too late. Last year, when I first came here, Shanghai City wasn't as big as it is now." That's right. I heard that our Shanghai City was just a small city in the beginning. It was Lord Zhang who led everyone to build it up to its current scale. What small city? I heard that it was just a village in the beginning. Elder Zhang, you're quite knowledgeable. What do you think? Elder Zhang replied with an unfathomable expression. It was indeed a village. That's incredible. Don't ask so many questions. Let Elder Zhang tell us what the royal city looks like. The young man at the beginning was a little anxious. Yes, yes, yes. The royal city is really amazing. The ground is paved with golden bricks, the railings are made of jade, and the buildings are carved with paintings. It's beautiful beyond compare. In the royal city, there's an altar to worship the heavens and a grand temple. The ancestral hall of our ancestor, the Yellow Emperor, is built in the royal city. The most amazing thing is, of course, the Marquis Lian's residence. It's really magnificent. Elder Zhang's words were half true and half false. Most of them were made up by him. His literary talent was not bad. After a lively explanation, the group of young people who were listening were shocked and exclaimed from time to time. The scene that happened in the corner of the street was just a portrayal of Shanghai City. The same scene was happening in every corner of the city, forming a vivid picture of the human world. To be continued. Chapter 455. The Wuji Hall of the Protectorate of Southern Border. With the help of the maids, Ouyang Shuo put on the royal robe and crown for the second time. The scarlet knight sword hung on the left side of his waist, and the golden qilin seal hung on the right. After putting on the robe, he walked out of the Wuji Hall, passed through the pavilions, and arrived at the entrance. At the entrance, a carriage specially used by the Marquis was already ready. The carriage was pulled by 5 elite azure beetle horses. Their hair was azure without a trace of other colors. It was the standard carriage of a marquis. The entire frame of the carriage was not sealed. Instead, it was open with only a canopy at the top. Ouyang Shuo boarded the carriage and headed toward the Temple of Heaven. Along the way, the ground was covered in red carpet and the divine martial guard stood guard. Under the dark blue sky, the marble-paved heavenly altar stretched as far as the eye could see, empty and distant. The Temple of Heaven was guarded by the divine martial guards. There was a sentry every 5 steps. This divine martial guard unit only had 200 people. They were the core force protecting Ouyang Shuo and did not go with the army. The divine martial guards had solemn expressions. Their bright red divine martial cloaks fluttered in the wind. On the square of the Temple of Heaven, all the important officials of the Protectorate of Southern Border, except for Bai Qi and the others who were out on a campaign, were present. They stood neatly on the left side of the square according to their ranks. Minister Xiao, he stood at the front of the group. Next to him was the principal of the military lecture hall, War Saint Sun Wu. Behind him were the 4 bureau chiefs. Behind them were Honglu Minister Zhang Yi, Shanghai Commandant Zhang Wenzhong, and Lianzhou County Chief Wei Ran. Finally, there were the bureau chiefs and the prefectures of Lianzhou County, the deans of Southwest University China Hall, and the section chiefs of the military lecture hall were also invited to attend the ceremony. In addition, there were more than 100 students from the 2 great institutions. All the students wore the same uniform. It was a spectacular scene. On the right side of the square were the 100 Clans children. The 100 Clans Grandmaster, Jiang Shang, was also the officiator. He stood at the front of the group. Behind him were Confucius, Laozi, Mahist, and Han Fizi. Behind them were Zhuang Zi, Mencius, Sun Zi, Lu Buwei, Shun Ji, Hui Shi, Yin Yin, and Su Qin. Finally, there were the representatives of the other sections. Other than that, all the scholars who stayed in Jushin Brothel were invited to attend. This was also the first time the 100 Clans progeny had gathered together. Such a grand occasion was rarely seen in 10,000 years. On both sides of the Temple of the Yellow Emperor were more than 100 ceremonial and musical officials specially trained by the Department of Culture and Education. The ceremonial officer was responsible for arranging the sacrificial site, while the musicians were responsible for playing special elegant music during the sacrificial period. There were more than 400 people standing in the huge square, but it didn't seem crowded at all. All the teams were in an orderly manner and had a strict hierarchy. Although the heaven offering ceremony had yet to begin, no one made any noise on the plaza. It was extremely solemn. Without a doubt, the heaven worship ceremony this time would be unprecedentedly grand. Ouyang Shuo wanted to make use of this opportunity to display the strength and resources of Shanghai City to the 100 schools of philosophers. The carriage stopped at the designated location, and Ouyang Shua slowly walked down from it. Under the illumination of the sunlight, the majestic Ouyang Shua looked even taller. He looked as dignified as a mountain and as imposing as the sea. The secretary, Lang by Nanpu, shouted, "Lord of Shanghai City, Protector General of the Southern Border, Marquis Lian Province has arrived." The title of Protector General of the Southern Border was only an official title. To Ouyang Shua, the title of Marquis of Lian Province was the most important title, and it was also one of the symbols of his status as a feudal lord. "Welcome, Marquis." He led the hundreds of officials to welcome him and bowed. "Welcome, Marquis of Lian Province." Jiang Shang and the 100 schools of philosophers also bowed. Ouyang Shua was the only one standing on the spacious plaza, looking down at everyone. The scene made everyone's blood boil. When Ouyang Shua saw Confucius and the others bowing to him, an uncontrollable sense of pride rose in his heart. In the spring and autumn warring states period, the 100 schools of philosophers had to bow to those who were conferred the title of Marquis. Therefore, Ouyang Shua, accepting the greetings of the 100 schools of philosophers, wasn't overstepping his boundaries. The taste of power was indeed intoxicating. Even if the road ahead was filled with thorns and he had to live alone, Ouyang Shua had no regrets. His mentality was slowly changing. A true ruler was quietly rising in the wilderness. In the future, Ouyang Shua would be even more ruthless. He would exert his ambition and climb to the peak of power without stopping. He had no regrets in entrusting his life to his ambition. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "Everyone, please rise." "Thank you, Marquis." "Thank you, Marquis of Lian Province." Under the guidance of the ceremonial officer, Ouyang Shua took his seat in front of the official seat. Seeing this, He sang, "Everyone, take your seats. The ceremony shall begin. Welcome, Yellow Emperor Xinyuan." As soon as he finished speaking, the musicians started to play elegant music. The melodious music passed through the Temple of Heaven, through the walls of Monarch City, and spread throughout Shanghai City. The commoners in the city started to pray at home, worshipping Yellow Emperor Xinyuan. In an instant, invisible power of incense gathered towards the Yellow Emperor statue in the Yellow Emperor Shrine. The officiant, Jiang Shang, bowed deeply and said, "Ancestor, Yellow Emperor Xinyuan, respectfully welcomes the ancestor's return." He sang, "Lay down the coins." What followed was a set of complicated sacrificial rituals. The entire ceremony was abnormally strict, without a single flaw. Whether it was Confucius or Laozi, both of them were extremely proficient in etiquette and could not tolerate any mistakes. After the 3 offerings, He sang, "Read the good wishes." Jiang Shang faced the divine throne of the Yellow Emperor, knelt on the seat, and recited the prayers. Vigaya's second year, the 16th day of the 8th lunar month. The year is Jiashin, the sun is high in the sky, the wind is gentle, and the earth is bright. The people of Shanghai City, as well as the 100 schools of thought, gathered at the Yellow Emperor Shrine in Shanghai City. They drank wine to express their sincerity. I pay my respects to the first ancestor of the human race, the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan. How illustrious is my ancestor's merit and virtue. Build the palace and bless the people. Arboriculture helps the common people. Riding on a horse and riding on a cow, the mountain path is clear. Using the Qian Kuan to straighten his clothes, creating a book to establish the 5 elements. The 9 states would be unified. Teach widely, and the 4 seas are the same sect. The great cause of 1,000 years, the beginning of a civilization of 10,000 years. He laid the foundation of Huaxia, and all the races flourished. Only strength is worship, only virtue is conduct. He was virtuous and meritorious, praised for generations to come. The majestic China's dragon's vein was everlasting. The divine land was continuous. The sun rose, and the moon remained constant. The wilderness was covered with thorns. The 100 schools of thought resonated. I pay my respects to the ancestors. and bless them with good fortune. The ceremony is complete, and I await you. After the ceremony, Shao He sang, drink the blessing and receive the punishment. It was another set of complicated sacrificial rituals. Finally, Shao He sang, Ancestor Xianyuan has gone far. The ceremony is complete. At this moment, the heaven-worshipping ritual was officially completed. The moment it was completed, the statue of the Yellow Emperor in the Yellow Emperor Shrine suddenly emitted rays of golden light. The rays of light pierced through the Yellow Emperor Shrine and spread to the entire Shanghai city. Seeing this scene, the 100 schools of thought and the people of the city cried tears of joy. It was a miracle. The ancestor has shown himself. The corner of Ouyang Shua's mouth curled up into a smile. The Yellow Emperor's appearance was enough to prove that Ouyang Shua's governance was recognized by the Yellow Emperor. As a lord, Ouyang Shua's virtue was also recognized by the Yellow Emperor. Only in a world of great governance would there be auspiciousness. The way Confucius and the others looked at Ouyang Shu also changed. The Marquis of Lian Province's position in their hearts rose by a large margin. Confucius, in particular, had a smile on his face. At first, Confucius thought that the Marquis of Lian Province would put Wei Yang in an important position and that there would be complaints in the territory. Who would have thought that it would be such a peaceful scene? At the same time, Ouyang Shua heard the sound of a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has nothing to wear. The ancestor's auspiciousness has descended on Shanghai City, increasing the popularity of the people by 2 points, instantly increasing the quality of the people in the city by 25 points. Congratulations. Although it was only 2 points, the popularity of the people in Shanghai City was originally 92 points, which was close to the maximum. Every point was extremely precious. That was not the end. Another system notification followed. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has nothing to wear. The Yellow Emperor Shrine has received the worship of the 100 schools of thought, greatly increasing your attributes. Please check for yourself. Name. Yellow Emperor Shrine type, hidden building, functions. Increase resident satisfaction by 50. Increase territory popularity by 20 characteristics. Ancestors' blessing. Increase the physical quality of residents by 55. Flourishing scholarly aura. Increase the cultural quality of residents by 30. Remarks. The Yellow Emperor Shrine has the reputation of being the #1 shrine in the world. It is the main place in southern China where people worship the ancestor of the Chinese people, the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. After the worship, not only did the Yellow Emperor Shrine gain a new characteristic, but its original attributes had also increased. Ouyang Shua did not expect such a pleasant surprise. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua looked at the Confucian Temple and the Martial Temple on both sides of the Yellow Emperor Shrine. The reason was because the literary sage Confucius and the martial sage Jiangshang were gathered here. Such a scene was also hard to come by in 10,000 years. Apart from Shanghai City, no other territory could have such a heaven-defying encounter. After worshipping the Yellow Emperor, the next step was to move to the Southwest University China Hall for the most exciting competition. Ouyang Shua hurriedly asked Confucius and Jiangshang to write new plaques for the Confucian Temple and the Martial Temple to commemorate this rare event. The two did not refuse when they heard this. Of course, Confucius might not have agreed if it was not for the previous manifestation. It should be noted that Confucius was a humble man. He would not easily leave behind treasures. Ouyang Shua was secretly happy to get the treasures of the two sages. He immediately asked the Director of Education and Culture, Su Shuda, to immediately make new plaques according to the treasures of the two sages. Ouyang Shua wanted to see what would happen to the two temples. After that, Ouyang Shua led the civil and military officials to the Southwest University China Hall. At this time, the 100 schools lecture room was full. The scholars from the Jushin Road were the main seats. Ouyang Shua sat in the front row of the hall, ready to quietly be a spectator. There were only 3 people on the podium. They were Jiangshang, Confucius of the Confucian school, and Han Fei of the legalist school. The competition between the Confucian school and the legalist school had entered the second stage. Strangely, whether it was Confucius or Han Fei, there was no competitive spirit on their faces. Ouyang Shuo had a premonition that this competition might open up a new chapter. To be continued. Chapter 456. Lecture Room, Southwest University, China Lecture Hall. Confucius and Han Fei didn't have a battle of words, nor did they have a tit for tat. The entire debate was like a gentle breeze and drizzle. It was more like an exchange between the two masters. Both Confucius and Han Fei had been traveling in the wilderness for more than a year and had a clear and profound understanding of the social structure of the wilderness. This had a huge impact on their thinking. Not only that, but the mutants also influenced the two of them. That's right, it was the player lords like Ouyang Shuo. The China region was so large that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Not only Shanghai City, but other territories would more or less integrate some advanced systems and arrangements based on reality. These novel systems and bold ideas had an undeniable impact on the two of them. The game world was completely different from the spring and autumn and warring states periods. However, the sages were sages. No matter how the world changed, the light of their ideas was still as bright as ever. The two of them talked about their insights from their travels. Often, just a few words were enough to make people think. Cheers! From time to time, there would be earth-shattering cheers in the hall. One was never too old to learn. The two masters of thought had used their actions to teach the 100 schools of thought the most vivid lesson. In the future, there would be debates between the Confucian and legalist schools, and even the 100 schools of thought. However, there was a major premise, which was to be inclusive, not conservative, and not conservative. Finally, Jiang Shang walked to the front of the stage. The 100 schools of thought have their own strengths and weaknesses. When we pursue our studies, we should temper ourselves and move forward, carefully carve. The purpose of contention is not to determine the winner, but to encourage each other. May the world of great contention last forever. Ouyang Shuo stood up and took the lead in clapping. The world of great contention. Well said. The regret of the 100 schools of thought during the spring and autumn and warring states periods was not who won or lost, but that the cultural atmosphere of contention was completely erased by the rulers of the later generations. This was beneficial to maintaining the rule of the dynasty, but it was harmful to the eruption of ideas and culture. Ouyang Shuo turned around and made a solemn promise to the 100 schools of thought. Shanghai City will definitely uphold the concept of inclusive, open to all rivers. We will never respect one school or sect. I hope that all schools of thought will be able to take root in Shanghai City. The hall was filled with thunderous applause. At this point, the curtains of the Jingming assembly had officially fallen. The moment the curtain fell, the sound of the system notification entered Ouyang Shuo's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player. Don't say you don't have clothes for completing the A-rank side quest. 100 schools contend again. Rewarding 4,000 achievement points, 40,000 reputation points. System notification. Congratulations to player. Don't say you don't have clothes for completing the reproducing the 100 schools of thought quest. Reward. Shanghai City's cultural holy land. Title. Please check for yourself. Ouyang Shuo understood and checked the title's attributes. Cultural holy land. Increase the education level of the territory's residents by 45. Increase the territory's cultural index by 10. Increase the territory's civil officials by 25. Increase talent attraction rate by 35. As expected of the Holy Land of Culture. With this title, there was no need for Shanghai City to worry about not being able to recruit talents. The end of the conference was not the end. After the struggle, Ouyang Shuo experienced many twists and turns and finally obtained Jiang Shang's approval. This Grandmaster of the 100 Schools of Thought accepted Ouyang Shuo's invitation and officially became the principal of Southwest University China Hall. Once the news came out, the 100 clans were shaken. The first to express their stance was the Confucians. Although the great sage Confucius was still mainly traveling, Confucius announced that he would be giving a lecture at Southwest University China Hall for a month. When the news came out, the Confucians of the world were shocked. Previously, when Confucius was traveling, his whereabouts were either secretive or he passed by in a hurry. He had never stayed in one place for a long time. This time, Confucius would be giving a lecture at Southwest University China Hall for a month. It could be said that he was breaking the precedent. It could be foreseen that in the next few days, there would be a large number of scholars and Confucians flooding into Shanghai City to listen to Confucius' teachings. Ouyang Shuo had specifically instructed Fan Zhongyin to use this opportunity to recruit talented people. After this matter, Ouyang Shuo's grievance from Emperor Qin's expelling of the Confucians was completely resolved. Perhaps those Confucians who left Xianyang City and were preparing to live in seclusion would be inspired by Confucius and come to Shanghai City to become officials. Other than the great sage Confucius, the second sage Mencius of the Confucians also accepted Ouyang Shuo's invitation to become the principal of Southwest University, China Hall of Scriptures. Along with Mencius, a large number of Confucians also stayed. The School of Scriptures was truly worthy of its name. In the future, the School of Scriptures would nurture a large number of Confucian scholars for the territory. The only regret was that because of Confucius, even if Mencius became an official in Shanghai City, it did not mean that the Confucians would be stationed in Shanghai City. It could be foreseen that the Confucians would not be stationed in any of the territories. After the Confucians, it was the legalists. The legalists, Han Fei, accepted Ouyang Shuo's invitation to establish a law school at Southwest University China Hall. Other than that, Shun Dao of the legalists would also become the deputy principal of the law school. The two giants of the legalists would use the law school as the foundation to nurture talents of the legalists to govern the world. This included professional bureaucrats such as inquisitors, wardens, and forensic doctors that the Internal Affairs Department urgently needed. Another figure of the legalists, Shun Buhai, would become the protectorate of the southern border. Compared to Han Fei and Shun Dao, Shun Buhai was more interested in fame and fortune. For no other reason than that Shun Buhai advocated techniques. Techniques were the art of politics. Shun Buhai's techniques were like a blade specially made for the monarch. Therefore, it was only by serving the Lord and offering him this murderous knife that his skills could be put to good use. That was to say, it required the monarch to grasp the power of life and death, emphasizing the dictatorial position of the Lord in the territory government, and must not let the power fall to others. Apart from killing people, he also had to teach the officials how capable they were. Teaching the abilities of the officials was to supervise, examine, and guard against the officials. Both of them were Yang techniques, and they were above-board techniques. Apart from the Yang technique, he also had to supplement it with Yin technique. Monarchs needed to set up eyes and ears to understand and grasp the situation of their subjects in time. They needed to discover the problems and conspiracies of their subjects in time to prevent certain powerful subjects or even important subjects from usurping power. Ouyang Shuo understood Shun Buhai's capabilities and immediately thought of a suitable position. It was the security division that he had been unable to establish. Shun Buhai's suggestion was the same as the responsibility of the security forces. Shun Buhai was very interested in Ouyang Shuo's suggestion, and he gladly accepted it. Just like that, Shanghai City's largest intelligence agency, the Security Division, was quietly established while no one else was aware of it. Under Shun Buhai's suggestion, the Security Division's name was changed to Shanghai Guards, implying that it protected the Shanghai government. Not only was the Shanghai Guards responsible for monitoring the officials, but they also had the authority to monitor the Black Snake Guards and the Military Intelligence Department. It was the territory's #1 intelligence agency. Shun Buhai was appointed by Ouyang Shuo as the commander of the Shanghai Guards. Other than Shun Buhai, the Shanghai Guards also recruited a group of legalists and mahists to strengthen the Shanghai Guards. That's right, it was the mahists. Following the legalists and Confucians, the Mahists also expressed their stance. MOZ accepted Ouyang Shua's invitation and became the dean of the physics department of Southwest University, China. Other than ideologies, the Mahists were also well-versed in epistemology, logic, geometry, optics, mechanics, engineering, and many other scientific fields. MOZ was the most suitable person to be in charge of the physics department. The moment MOZ took up his post, another system announcement sounded. System announcement. The representative of the Mahists, MOZ, has become an official in the Shanghai territory and is now in charge of the physics department. He has accepted disciples and fulfilled the 3 conditions for a sect to enter. The Mahists of the 100 schools of thought have officially entered Shanghai City. System announcement. The Mahists of the 100 schools of thought have officially entered Shanghai City. Shanghai City will be given the title Mahists Sacred Land as a reward. Congratulations to player, don't say you have no clothes. Ouyang Shua smiled and checked the attributes of the title. Mahists Sacred Land. Territory's technology level increased by 35. Territory's development efficiency increased by 40. Territory's skilled people skill proficiency increased by 15. Territory security increased by 10. As expected, the Mahists Sacred Land mainly focused on technology. The Mahists' research on siege weapons and siege tactics were top-notch. Other than MOZ as the dean of the physics department, there was another important person in the Mahists who would be the section chief of the military engineering section of the military force lecture hall. Other than that, the members of the Mahists would also teach engineering, city building, siege, and many other subjects in the military force lecture hall. The entry of the Mahists filled many gaps in the military force lecture hall. In the Mahists, other than the school of thought, there was another school, the Wanderer School. The Shanghai Guards recruited the Mahists Wanderers. Other than that, the intelligence network that the Mahists had established through the commoners would gradually be integrated into the Shanghai Guards. For this reason, Ouyang Shua specially promoted one of MOZ's favorite disciples to be the Mountain Sea Guards Provost. His position was only below the commander Shenbuhai. Therefore, the newly established Shanghai Guards became a competition between the Mahists and the French. Although Ouyang Shua trusted Shenbuhai, he would not trust him completely. He would use the art of checks and balances in the Shanghai Guards. This was the only way he could firmly control the Shanghai Guards. Be it Shenbuhai or the Mahists, if they wanted to control the Shanghai Guards, they would have to obtain Ouyang Shua's support. Ouyang Shua could handle the ruling with ease. For an organization like the Shanghai Guards, it was easy for them to be unable to escape. Ouyang Shua knew how dangerous this was, so he would definitely take precautions. Other than the Mahists and the French keeping each other in check, Ouyang Shua still had a trump card, which was Cui Tianqi and the other disciples who were still training in the Special Forces training base. Cui Tianqi was Ouyang Shua's true confidant. In the future, what role Cui Tianqi would play in the Shanghai Guards would depend on his luck. The Mahists played an important role in the Shanghai Guards and the 2 great academies. Their status was enough to compete with the military school, legalism school, and Confucianism school. As expected of a great sect, they had a deep foundation. Among the Confucians, legalists, and Mahists, only the Taoists were determined not to become officials. After the meeting, Laozi, Zhuangzi, and the other Taoists disappeared. The entire Shanghai city began to slowly return to peace. To be continued. Chapter 457. Other than the Confucian, legalist, Taoist, and Mahist schools, the other schools all had disciples in Shanghai City. More than half of them chose to enter the Southwest University China Hall, either to study or to teach. The 100 schools of thought were best at theoretical research. The Southwest University China Hall was the most suitable place. With the 100 schools of thought, the Southwest University China Hall was comparable to Jixia Academy in history, maybe even better. After all, Jixia Academy didn't have Jiangshang, Hanfei Zi, Mo Zi, Shundao, Su Xing, and other important figures. The 100 Schools of Thought lecture stage was preserved. According to Principal Jiangshan's arrangement, the Southwest University China Hall would organize a conference every month. The world of great competition was showing its brilliance. Shanghai City had gained a lot from this conference, but there were also many regrets in the joy. Hui Shi and Gong Sunlong of the famed school, Su Qin of the School of Vertical and Yang School of Lu Buwei, and Ian of the School of Yinyang prepared to leave after the conference ended. Especially Su Qin. Xiao He's repeated invitations were rejected. According to Su Qin, he didn't want to work with Zhang Yi and wanted to find a better job. When Ouyang Shuo heard the news, his expression was calm, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. That afternoon, Cui Tianqi, who was still training, was summoned to Ouyang Shuo's study. Marquis. This was the first time Cui Tianqi was summoned alone. He was both nervous and excited. Do you dare to kill? Cui Tianqi's heart trembled. He cupped his fists and said, As the Marquis commands, I will go through fire and water without hesitation. Cui Tianqi's sword had already tasted the blood of people and bandits when he was training in the Cliff State. Ouyang Shuo heard this and shook his head. He didn't know where he learned this slang from. Ouyang Shuo took out a portrait from the table and said, If that's the case, get rid of this person. Yes. Cui Tianqi walked up and carefully took the portrait. He glanced at it and put it away. He didn't ask who this person was or why the Marquis wanted to kill him. He just had to carry out the Marquis orders. Ouyang Shuo nodded with satisfaction when he saw this. Even though Tianqi was young, he was steady and composed, knew his limits, and didn't become hot-blooded. He was indeed a good seedling. Remember, keep it a secret. Don't let anyone know. Understood. Cui Tianqi's expression was solemn, and his heart skipped a beat. Once this matter was exposed, even Ouyang Shuo was unable to imagine how he would deal with it. A dignified feudal lord had just declared in the Zhengming assembly that he wanted to be inclusive, yet the very next day, he went to assassinate the 100 Clans child. This was simply too outrageous. Ouyang Shuo wouldn't make any excuses. Anyone who stood in his way was an enemy. Ouyang Shuo didn't want to be merciful to his enemies. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame this person for being too tactless. Go. After everything was done, there was no need to report back to the base. If you fail, you must inform me immediately. Do not act recklessly. Because this was Tianqi's first mission, Ouyang Shuo had no choice but to carefully remind him. Ouyang Shuo's impression of this young man was different from others. Cui Tianqi nodded his head vigorously, like a child, and turned to leave the study. Ouyang Shuo looked at Tianqi's back and sighed. He didn't know if leading this child on this path was the right or wrong thing to do. If he knew about this, she would probably feel uneasy. At 4 in the afternoon, Ouyang Shuo was dealing with documents when he suddenly heard a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player, don't say you don't have clothes. Shanghai City's civil and military temples have obtained the inscriptions of the civil and military saints. The title Civil and Military Gathering is specially bestowed to Shanghai City. Please check it yourself. Su Shuda's actions were quite fast. He had inscribed the words in the morning, and by the afternoon, he had already completed the board. Civil and Military Gathering. The quality of the territory's civil officials and soldiers increases by 15. This title might sound impressive, but its attributes were ordinary. It couldn't be compared to the various holy lands. It was better than nothing. Ouyang Shuo could be considered content. Who knew that this wasn't the end of it? At this moment, another system notification sounded. System notification. Congratulations to player, don't say you don't have clothes. The 7 titles Military Holy Land, Legalism Holy Land, Farming Holy Land, Vertical and Horizontal, Mahist Holy Land, Culture Holy Land, and Civil and Military Gathering have been activated. Do you want to merge them? In just a moment of carelessness, the Shanghai City had already obtained so many titles of sacred grounds. This was practically insane. Previously, when he merged the title Land of Prosperous Marshal, Ouyang Shuo knew that there should be no harm in merging the titles. After the merging, the title's potential would be even greater. However, this time, he wasn't going to merge a gold title like Home of Fist Arts Instead, it was going to be a purple gold title. If something went wrong, Ouyang Shua would have to jump off a building. Merge! Ouyang Shua clenched his teeth and decided to take a gamble. System notification. Congratulations to player, don't say you don't have clothes. The territorial titles have been successfully merged. Shanghai City has automatically obtained the title 100 Holy Land. The 7 titles Culture Holy Land have automatically disappeared. Please check it yourself. Ouyang Shua couldn't wait to check the title's attributes. His heart skipped a beat, afraid that something unexpected would happen. Title, 100 Holy Land, God Tier. Attributes, territory popularity plus 25, territory civilians plus 1, territories industry prosperity plus 25, territories for attributes plus 25. Characteristics, King of Nobles, deterrence to other races increased by 25. Evaluation, merge from the military Holy Land, Culture Holy Land, and other titles. With the blessing of the 100 schools of thought, the territory's industries and professions have been improved. Unique title, cannot be upgraded and cannot be transferred. Phew, Ouyang Shua let out a long sigh of relief. This time, he had won the gamble. The original 7 titles had a total of 26 attributes, which had been condensed into 4 attributes and 1 characteristic. Every attribute seemed simple, but it was actually very rich in content. Territory popularity was needless to say. It was both a normal attribute and a rare one. Territory civilians plus 1. This was amazing. The last time the system was updated, the NPC's aptitudes were divided into 4 grades. Each grade was an insurmountable gap. The aptitudes of NPCs had an impact on their skill proficiency, breaking through bottlenecks and scientific research. It was similar to the player's bone structure. Now, the overall aptitudes of the territory civilians have been increased by 1 grade. What did this mean? It was like cheating. Just this alone was enough to offset the bonus that the previous 7 titles gave to the territory. Without a doubt, with the blessing of the 100 Holy Land, the territory would have a large number of NPCs with A-grade aptitudes. It was just unknown whether those with A-grade aptitudes would be promoted again. The problem was that A-grade was already the highest. Could it be that Gaia still had some hidden settings? This question could only be slowly explored in the future. Increased industry prosperity was equivalent to an overall promotion of the territory's agriculture, commerce, handicrafts, manufacturing, and other industries. This attribute was mainly to offset the attributes of the Holy Land of farming and Holy Land of Moism. Furthermore, it expanded agriculture and manufacturing to all industries. Increased territory index was equivalent to an overall promotion of the territory's politics, economy, culture, and military. It was also a response to the Culture Holy Land and Military Holy Land. Apart from that, the economic index had also risen. Finally, there was a new concept, dispersal of kings. Obviously, dispersal of kings was the most direct response to vertical and horizontal. Not only that, but it went 1 step further. Not mentioning hostility or difficulty, it directly increased the deterrence. Domineering. After Ouyang Shua finished reading, he couldn't help but smile. The title of the 100 Family Holy Land was the best explanation for this Zhengming assembly. With this title, Shanghai City was invincible in the battle for hegemony in the China region. In terms of the quality of the NPCs, no territory could be compared to it. In the future, the territory would definitely usher in a period of great growth and fruitful results. As the Zhengming Conference came to an end, the candidates who wanted to become officials in Shanghai City had already expressed their positions. They would move out of Jushin Restaurant and live in the official residences arranged by Shanghai City. Those who wanted peace could directly live in the Southwest University China Hall or the Army Martial Arts Hall. The 2 academies occupied a large area and had a complete set of facilities. Hundreds of houses were hidden in the green mountains and clear waters. The candidates who did not want to become officials also began to pack their bags and prepare to leave Shanghai City. If they were scholars of the royal city, they would naturally leave through the transmission array. If they were historical figures who joined the wilderness after the war, such as Lu Buwei and the others, they could travel all the way in the wilderness. With the blessing given by Gaia, they could travel thousands of miles in a day. Ouyang Shuo once asked Wei Yang about this. It turned out that for every historical figure who joined the historical process, Gaia would give them a divine travel talisman. With this talisman, they could travel thousands of miles in a day safely. Once they chose to become officials, the divine travel talisman would be taken back by Gaia. When Ouyang Shuo heard this, he was envious. This was simply a divine artifact among divine artifacts. If he had a divine travel talisman, wouldn't he be able to patrol the territory every day? Tomorrow, Lu Buwei and the others would embark on their return journey. That night, the Jushin restaurant was lively. The candidates were still reminiscing about the conference during the day. It wasn't until late at night that they dispersed and returned to their rooms to rest. Just after everyone fell asleep, a black-clothed man quietly came to Su Qin's room. The black-clothed man looked left and right. After confirming that there was no one, he carefully opened the door. After entering the room, he did not stop at all and went straight to Su Qin, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. A cold light flashed in the black-clothed man's eyes. He quickly stepped forward and covered Su Qin's mouth with his hand at lightning speed. Then, he swung his sword and cut Su Qin's throat. A genius of the school of vertical and horizontal fell in his sleep. The black-clothed man moved quickly. He took out a black cloth bag that he had prepared in advance and put Su Qin's corpse in it. He left the room and disappeared into the night. Even if someone discovered that Su Qin was missing the next day, they would only think that he had left early. The night was dark. To be continued. Chapter 458. The 17th of August, Shanghai City. Xiaoyi represented the Marquis and sent them off at the city gates. The strange thing was that Xiaoyi did not see Su Qin in the crowd. Thinking back to the look in the Marquis's eyes, Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. After the end of the conference, Shanghai City became even busier. The establishment of the Shanghai Guards, the establishment of a law school, the reshuffling of the Southwest University China Hall and the military lecture hall, the reception of scholars from all over the world, and so on. Luckily, the officials were in charge of everything, and Ouyang Shuo didn't have to do it himself. After the conference, Ouyang Shuo turned his attention back to the battlefield in Zhaoqing. According to Bai Qi's report, the 50,000 Allied vanguard had arrived at the front lines yesterday and were stationed at Yunnan County. Yunnan County was located to the north of Songqing County. Following behind the vanguards, the 100,000 Allied soldiers would arrive as well. A great war was about to begin. At the same time, the 2nd and 4th Divisions of the Tiger Troop had just crossed the Jingzhou Straits. They would need another 2 weeks to reach Songqing County. The expeditionary fleet would arrive at Jiaozhou port in a few days. As the Allied forces gathered, Shanghai City's army did not have the upper hand. At this time, it was time to send out the Imperial Guard Division to reinforce Zhaoqing. Wulong County, which Black Snake had promised, had been successfully taken down and signed a temporary alliance with Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo's conditions were a county magistrate position and the title of a first-rank viscount. The Imperial Guard Division could teleport to Wulong County at any time. The problem was, according to Bai Qi's report, the Allied forces had 80,000 soldiers at the rear. It was unknown if the Imperial Guard Division could do anything to the enemy's rear. At least until now, the Southern Alliance had not revealed any flaws. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo was prepared to go personally. Firstly, the matter of Shanghai City had been settled, and there was no need for him to be there. Secondly, he wanted to stretch his body. Grass was growing on his back after staying in Shanghai City all day. Once he went out, he would not be able to return to Shanghai City in a short period of time. The Battle of Zhaoqing, the arrangements after the Battle of Chiyu City, etc. would take a long time. Ouyang Shuo would probably have to wait until the next battle before he could return to Shanghai City. The 5th battle will be triggered by the promotion of 15 cities. It had been more than 20 days since the end of the Battle of Giant Deer. During this period of time, Bawang County, Danyang County, and Xuanlong County had been promoted to county cities. The China region was still 7 cities away from the target of 15. Ouyang Shua estimated that the fifth battle wouldn't be triggered for at least 2 months. Thus, Ouyang Shua had to make proper arrangements for the territory before setting out. Guard, here, order the Imperial Guards to follow me into battle tomorrow. Yes, sir. When the guard heard this, he turned around and left excitedly. If the Marquis were to go to war, the 200 of them would have to go with him. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ouyang Shua summoned the 4 directors and Xiao He for a meeting. In just a single morning, the news of the Marquis's departure had already spread throughout the Southern Protectorate. Although Xiao He and the other civil officials believed that it was only right for the Marquis to stay in Shanghai City, they did not dare to dissuade him. In troubled times, it was very normal for the ruler to personally go into battle. I'm afraid that I won't be able to take care of Shanghai City for the time being. While I'm away, other than the important matters that can be reported through letters, the daily affairs of the Protectorate will be handled by Minister Xiao He. This decision was the result of Ouyang Shua's careful consideration. During the war between Chu and Han, it was Liu Bang who fought on the front lines while Xiao He stayed in the rear to manage his fief. Therefore, in terms of ability, Xiao He was qualified to take on this important responsibility. The only shortcoming was that Xiao He had just joined Shanghai City and did not have enough prestige. However, through organizing the Jingming Assembly, Xiao He had already handed in a beautiful answer sheet and obtained the initial approval of the officials. With Ouyang Shua's instructions, there shouldn't be any major problems. This was also the reason why Ouyang Shua summoned the 4 directors. As long as the 4 directors supported Xiao He's work, the general situation would basically be set. When Xiao He heard this, he stepped out of the ranks and solemnly bowed. Thank you for your trust, Marquis. Xiao He knew how heavy and precious this trust was. When the 4 directors saw this, they expressed their opinions one by one. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, I also have arrangements for the work of the 4 bureaus. Marquis, please give us your instructions. First, the military bureau. Other than supporting the front lines, there are 2 important tasks. First, improve the logistical security system. Second, establish a military merit system and a military rank system. Yes, these 2 tasks were the most important to the Marquis. How could Du Ruhui not understand? Second, the administrative bureau. Ouyang Shua looked at Fan Zhongyan and said, the administrative bureau should use the Zhongming Assembly as an opportunity to carry out a major change in the officials of the territory. The 4 directors, including Xiao He, were shocked. They could faintly smell the scent of blood. The territory has 3 counties. Other than Lianzhou County, Cheongzhou County, and Laizhou County have not been occupied for long. When we first occupied the 2 counties, in order to maintain local stability, the appointment and dismissal of officials were inevitably discounted. Now that the order of the territory has been restored, it's time to set things right and reorganize the officials. Ouyang Shua's tone was firm and unquestionable. I suggest that the Administrative Bureau use 1 to 2 months to conduct a comprehensive inspection of all the officials in the territory from the bottom to the top. Those who are capable will be promoted, and those who are mediocre will be relegated. We can also use this opportunity to settle the students who graduated from Southwest University China Hall in the first half of this year, as well as the newly recruited Confucian scholars. To put it bluntly, more than half of the current officials in the territory, especially the low-level officials in the various prefectures and counties, came from humble beginnings. They had not received any proper education at all. This situation was naturally caused by the lack of talents in the process of building the territory, and they could only be forced to do more than they could chew. Even Shanghai City was the same. Zhao Duong and the others were the same. After these territories were occupied, the bitter fruit was pushed to Shanghai City. It was undeniable that there were some people who had become talented after being tempered by the raging fire, such as Zhao Dexian and the others. However, more than 60% of them were useless, and they gradually became a burden to the territory. Ouyang Shua had already received news that there were officials in various prefectures and counties who had begun to take bribes, abuse the people, and run amok in the villages. Such behavior was naturally not tolerated by Ouyang Shah. The territory had yet to establish a complete talent selection system, such as the imperial examinations. It was not that Ouyang Shua did not want to, but the conditions were not ripe yet. At the current stage, the appointment and removal of officials could only be carried out through the inspection of the Administrative Bureau. This task not only took a long time, but it also involved the interests of all parties. If one was not careful, it could cause trouble. This was the only reason why it had to be carried out as soon as possible. They had to have the courage to completely remove the malignant tumor of the territory and return the people to peace. Otherwise, if they did not do anything about it, the small tumor would slowly ferment and grow into a big tumor. When that time came, it would not only harm the people, but also the rule of the territory. Ouyang Shua was extremely vigilant about this. This was also the reason why he had established the Shanghai Guards. In the future, the Shanghai Guards would be a sharp sword hanging above the heads of the civil and military officials, intimidating them. On the road to hegemony, external warfare was only the external cause. Internal governance was the internal motivation. Only by governing the territory well could they accumulate energy to launch wars and expand the territory. Otherwise, blind expansion would only result in an unstable foundation. In the end, it would be like a castle made of sand. It looked magnificent, but it would collapse with a slight push. There was no doubt that this task was the easiest to offend. Ouyang Shua believed that only the impartial Fan Zhongyan would be able to control it. Sven, I'll leave this matter to you. Don't worry, Marquis. What the Marquis was thinking was what Fan Zhongyan was worried about, so he naturally would not refuse. To him, as long as he could reorganize the government and sympathize with the people, personal gains and losses were nothing. Ouyang Shua nodded and did not mention it. He believed that Fan Zhongyan would be able to grasp the situation. Let's talk about the Interior Bureau. When Wei Yang heard this, he listened attentively. From the Marquis's instructions to the Military Bureau and the Administrative Bureau, Wei Yang did not dare to be negligent. The Marquis had a unique insight that normal people could not compare to. Every request he made was the lifeline of the various bureaus. Wei Yang had heard that the entire structure of the Southern Border Protectorate was single-handedly established by the Marquis. Before this, he had been skeptical, thinking that Fan Zhongyan and the others were just being humble. Now that he thought about it, he had no choice but to accept it. Although the Marquis was young, he had the insight of king. It was no wonder that even famous officials like Fan Zhongyan and Du Ruhui did not dare to be arrogant in front of the Marquis. In truth, Wei Yang was not the only one who was shocked. Xiaohe's heart was in turmoil. This was the first time he had seen the Marquis plan the future of his territory. Such a performance was that of a natural king. In comparison, Liu Bang, who he had followed before, was much more lackluster. The most important task of the Internal Affairs Bureau is to establish a complete system of investigation, and investigation. In the future, the power to investigate the cases of the various prefectures and counties will be handed over to the head of the Internal Affairs Bureau, not the prefectures or county magistrates. This move was breaking the shackles of ancient times. In ancient times, the magistrates who investigated cases were known as the Just Lord. In Ouyang Shua's view, this was absurd. The magistrate of the county should be in charge of the overall situation and should not overstep the rules and judge cases. Ouyang Shua's move was to turn the Internal Affairs Bureau into the political and legal committee of the real world. The Internal Affairs Bureau had the Public Order Bureau responsible for maintaining order and arresting criminals, the Punishment Bureau responsible for investigating cases, and the Inspection Bureau responsible for supervising officials and prosecuting lawsuits. What Ouyang Shua needed to do was to fully delegate power and have it truly operate. Removing the jurisdiction of the magistrates and prefectures was the first step of Ouyang Shua's authorization. Just this step was earth-shattering. Wei Yang's blood surged when he heard this. He felt a great sense of accomplishment. To be continued. Chapter 459. Ouyang Shua glanced at Wei Yang and continued. Other than setting up a system, we also need to train the corresponding professional bureaucrats. The opportunity is the newly established law school. Including the formulation of the territory's laws, we can use the resources of the law school. Yes, sir. Wei Yang nodded, full of energy. If the Mountain Sea Guards were secretly monitoring, then the Ministry of Internal Affairs was the system. The Mountain Sea Guards were the techniques, while the Ministry of Internal Affairs was the Tao. Techniques could be used for a while, but the Tao could last. Ouyang Shua had a scale in his heart. Who was the root and who was the end? The Tao of the Ministry of Internal Affairs was reflected in the territory's laws. With the laws, the Ministry of Internal Affairs had a basis to judge and judge cases, and not judge based on the judge's personal experience. With the laws, the Ministry of Internal Affairs had a basis to judge and sentence. It could be said that the laws were the core of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. When Wei Yang first took office, Ouyang Shua had explained the territory's laws. This was because the matter was too complicated and involved all aspects of the territory. Furthermore, it was of great importance. Even Wei Yang could not complete it in one go. The arrival of Han Feizi, Shun Dao, and Shin Buhai made Wei Yang heave a sigh of relief. The four giants of legalism had shown great interest in formulating the territory's laws as they chatted. This was also one of the reasons why Han Feizi and Shun Dao were willing to teach at Southwest University China Hall. For legalists, if they could formulate a law that was suitable for the rules of the wilderness, it would naturally be more persuasive and influential than any other theory. The entire law was the condensation and sublimation of legalist theory. The four of them were confident that with Shanghai City's potential and momentum of development, the law they formulated would eventually spread to the entire wilderness and become an existence recognized by the world. That way, no one would be able to ignore the existence of legalism, no matter which faction it was. Precisely because of this, they were extremely cautious and did not dare to rush the draft. According to Wei Yang's estimation, it was already very impressive to be able to complete the first draft before the end of the year. Other than the four giants of legalism, the drafting team of the law also included real-life legal experts. For these experts, there were two reasons for participating in the drafting of the territory's laws. First, they could use this opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of legalism and broaden their horizons. Legalism was limited by the times, but it also had its merits. Therefore, regardless of whether it was Wei Yang and the others or the legal experts, the joint drafting of the territory code was a process of mutual learning and interaction. Wei Yang and the rest were also very interested in the legal concepts proposed by the legal experts. Secondly, the legal experts also wanted to take this opportunity to explore a try. In the future, when the immigration fleet arrived on Planet Hope, due to the changes in the social structure, the operational model, and the adjustment of the environment, the laws of the Federation would have to be adjusted accordingly. Shanghai City's legal experts focused on the study of Lord's law, how to effectively supervise the Lord while giving him sufficient authority. This was a topic that the legal world had never encountered before. After all, the territorial model of Hope Planet must not overly restrict the authority of the feudal lords. Otherwise, it would dampen their enthusiasm for pioneering. Without a doubt, this was an interesting topic. Because of this, the legal experts who settled in Shanghai City saw an opportunity to experiment in the process of assisting Shanghai City in formulating the territorial laws. Of course, because of the different eras, one was in ancient times, the other was in modern times. The territorial laws that they had set up were not applicable on Hope Planet. However, some of the legal connotations were interlinked. The law experts, who were bored to begin with, were naturally willing to give it a try and threw themselves into the work of drafting the territory's laws. The enthusiasm that burst forth from them surprised their families. Not only that, but they also spread the news in the small circle of the legal world. There were many legal experts who were interested in this, and they were all teleported to Shanghai City. Among these legal experts, almost all of them covered major fields such as constitutional law, civil and commercial law, administrative law, criminal law, and economic law. They were very helpful in formulating the territorial laws. Of course, when Ouyang Shuang met with the legal experts, he had already solemnly stated that the territorial laws that were formulated were all based on protecting the feudal lord's autocratic rule. Otherwise, he would not approve of the territorial laws that were formulated. Ouyang Shuang did not want to see things like equality, democracy, and freedom appear in the laws. Ouyang Shuang was stunned by Ouyang Shuang's shamelessness. How could there be such a person who brazenly declared that he wanted to be autocratic? Shouldn't this kind of thing be concealed? Some of the experts could not stand Ouyang Shuang's arrogance and directly left. Ouyang Shuang bowed to these people one by one and sent them off. His attitude was sincere and firm. In this way, even the experts who left could not say anything. After all, everyone had the right to pursue their own ideals. Moreover, this was only a game, so there was no need to take it too seriously. Of course, there were also some experts who admired Ouyang Shuang more and more. From their point of view, the future development of Hope Planet might need such a talent. Only a tyrant would be able to settle the chaotic world. In short, the benevolent see benevolence, and the wise see wisdom. After discussing the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the last one was the Ministry of Finance. There are two important matters in the Ministry of Finance. The first is to adjust the responsibilities of the Ministry of Industry. The future Ministry of Industry should focus on formulating and guiding the territory's industrial policies. As for the specific operations of the industries, they should gradually withdraw and hand them over to the local authorities. For example, the Three Flower Winery, the Wolf Mountain Mine, and other industries could be handed over to Shanghai City. The Ministry of Industry only needs to firmly control the mining, military, and shipbuilding industries. Ing Pomelo nodded, indicating that she remembered. Other than the military industry, the future shipbuilding industry really had enough room for imagination. Its profits might not be inferior to the military industry. Other than the various large chambers of commerce, adventure-type players would also buy merchant ships. Since Cliff Mountain City was further opened up, merchant ships and small warships became hot products in an instant. The supply could not meet the demand. Especially after the expedition team, led by Lin Jing, discovered a treasure on a deserted island, the other guilds went crazy. One by one, they imitated Morning Snow Rose and formed their own expedition teams. To the players, with the advantage of reincarnation, they had the spirit of adventure and dared to explore the unknown sea. In a short period of time, sea exploration became a new trend for adventure-type players. If a guild didn't have a sea exploration team, they would lose face. According to Sun Xiaoya's feedback, the daily flow of people in Cliff Mountain City had already exceeded 2,000, which was really terrifying. Just the commission from the teleportation fees was enough to make Cliff Mountain City's hands go limp. Other than that, when the major guilds went out to explore, Cliff Mountain City became their only supply base. The spending of adventure-type players had already accounted for more than half of the total spending in Cliff Mountain City. Ouyang Shuang saw a business opportunity and simply sold the obsolete equipment of Shanghai City's army in Cliff Mountain City, earning a large sum of money. There were all kinds of deserted islands that the players explored. There might be a group of rare wild beasts living on the island, or it might be a rare mine, or it might be the burial place of pirates. There was even the possibility of finding natives on the deserted island. The most unlucky would be landing on the island, only to find that it was the nest of some island organization. Of course, the biggest possibility was that it was a deserted island with nothing on it. All of these completely satisfied the player's passion for adventure. Of course, sea exploration wasn't without risks. The biggest headache was naturally the pirates. The pirates that were still in the sea around Cliff Mountain City were basically wiped out by the Cliff Mountain fleet, so there was no need to worry for the time being. Other than pirates, there were also deep-sea giant beasts in the deep sea, which was not a small threat to the ships. Other than pinning their hopes on the Cliff Mountain fleet, some guilds, such as the Snow Death Rose Mercenary Group, had already started to form their elite navy to fight against the pirates and deep-sea giant beasts. After all, regardless of whether it was pirates or deep-sea giant beasts, even though they were extremely ferocious. Once they were defeated, the rewards would be extremely bountiful. This was the situation where riches came from danger. The adventure-type players, especially the leaders of the major guilds, had great foresight. Other than dealing with the pirates and deep-sea giant beasts, they also had another goal, which was to prepare for the future war between nations. Everyone knew that in the war between nations in the China region, the most likely targets would be the various island nations. This was especially so for the Japanese, who were a thorn in the side of the China region's players, and they had to get rid of them as soon as possible. Because the lore players had large businesses, they might have some concerns. However, the adventure-type players were different. Once they were hot-blooded, they wouldn't say anything and would just do it. At most, they would die, but after reincarnating, they would be a good man again. There is no lack of such hot-blooded players in the major guilds. Even Ouyang Shuo had participated in the war against the Japanese in his previous life. This sort of hostility and patriotism wasn't something that players from other regions could understand. Ouyang Shuo could still remember how intense that war was. In the end, the China region's expeditionary army suffered heavy losses and returned without achieving anything. Before he was reincarnated, the China region had organized a second expedition, and they wouldn't rest until they destroyed the Japanese. Thinking about this, a cold glint flashed in Ouyang Shuo's eyes. Let's put an end to the regrets from my previous life in this life. It was because of this that the major guilds were so proactive. In particular, Shanghai City's formation of 2 naval fleets was a clear signal. The leaders of the various guilds were very confident in the foresight of the Lord of Shanghai City. All of this was the result of Ouyang Shuo's actions behind the scenes. His little Aunt Lin Jing's treasure hunt was also guided by him. If they wanted to win the war between nations, they had to nurture a large number of naval forces. With Shanghai City's strength alone, it was impossible for them to do so. They had to borrow the strength of the players in the China region. Ouyang Shuo was playing a big game of chess. To be continued. Chapter 460. P.S. Updated again. Other than adventure-type players, Ouyang Shuo would also treat the Overlord players the same. Even if the coastal territories wanted to buy warships from Shanghai City in the future, Ouyang Shuo would not refuse. He wanted to increase the strength of the navy of the entire China region to prepare for the future war. As for whether this would indirectly increase the strength of the navy of the coastal territories and become a threat to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo was not afraid. It was not that Ouyang Shuo was pretentious, nor was it because he was great. But those who were far-sighted would always be able to give up some visible benefits to obtain invisible benefits. As the territory expanded, Ouyang Shuo became more and more confident. His eyes gradually moved away from the territory and began to pay attention to the situation of the entire China region. The higher one stood, the further one could see. Strengthening oneself was always more practical and reliable than suppressing the opponent. It was also time to put some pressure on the Cliff Mountain Fleet and the North Bay Fleet. Ouyang Shuo was confident that Shanghai City could stabilize its position as the maritime overlord of the China region. According to Kai Mao's secret letter to Ouyang Shuo, Smoke Demon's performance in the Cliff Mountain Fleet was very dazzling and could be said to be rapid progress. A general of the Navy was slowly rising. Ouyang Shuo trusted Kai Mao's judgment. Before the Cliff Mountain Fleet set off, Ouyang Shuo had already promoted Smoke Demon to be the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Cliff Mountain Fleet through the military office. When the Cliff Mountain Fleet returned from Jiaozhou Port, if Smoke Demon's performance in this battle was satisfactory, Ouyang Shuo would authorize Smoke Demon to lead a navy alone and give him the title of Commander-in-Chief. The island exploration not only stimulated the shipbuilding industry, but also promoted the trade of Cliff Mountain City. Some of the players' gains from the exploration were not willing to return to Royal City to trade, so they directly traded in Cliff Mountain City. Because of this, a group of chambers of commerce specialized in buying exploration items was born. Among them, the largest buyer was a thread. With the resources of the Five-Finger Mountain and the island, a thread's problem of rare materials was finally solved. Under the leadership of the Iceberg Goddess, a thread, this guild was on the fast track. At least 10% of the adventure-type players spending in Cliff Mountain City went into a thread, this wallet. Whether it was medicine, equipment, special food, or backpacks, as long as the adventure-type players needed it, a thread naturally made a lot of money. In addition, because a thread was one of the first guilds to enter Cliff Mountain City, the shops they bought were all in the best locations, so it was impossible for their business not to flourish. Not to mention other things, with the prosperity of Cliff Mountain City, a thread, shops in Cliff Mountain City, the prices had already doubled. Of course, a thread would not be so stupid as to sell their shops. A thread, thread, a clan, a thread, star shaw thread, the star shing star thread. With the secret support of Shanghai City, Jiangu's Shadow Alliance, and Dream Cloud swallowing Top's single dream house, took advantage of the chaos to rise to power. Together with crisscrossing Sword Aura and Star Alliance, they gradually became equals. At this time, the capital was no longer dominated by one guild, but 4 strong guilds. Star Alliance's growth was greatly suppressed. If it was not for Di-Chun lending a helping hand to Star at the critical moment, Star Alliance would probably have ceased to exist. In other words, the capital had become a battlefield between Di-Chun and Ouyang Shaw. Both of them supported 2 guilds and fought in the capital, stirring up the situation. Star Alliance, which had been in the limelight for a while, was completely reduced to a chess piece. The rise of the players' trade made Cliff Mountain City gradually become a trade city. The development of Cliff Mountain City was enough to prove Ouyang Shua's strategic vision. The development potential of the island city made other coastal lords envious. Ouyang Shua heard that Xiongba had already set his sights on Izhou Island. There were many people who had the same idea as Xiongba, including the dragon-seeking acupoint, as another island that was as famous as Jingzhou Island. After seeing Cliff Mountain City's ability to attract gold, it became a delicious cake that everyone wanted a bite of. Even Ouyang Shua had ideas about this. It was just that Shanghai City was busy with its own affairs and had no time to launch a war against Izhou Island. He just didn't know whether Izhou Island would end up in the hands of some warlords or fall into the hands of some lord. However, no matter who occupied Izhou Island, Ouyang Shua would take it back sooner or later. He was that overbearing. Ouyang Shua raised his head and looked at Ingyu, then said, "In addition, the Department of Commerce also needs to set up a maritime cargo fleet to completely open up the sea trade barrier between the 3 counties. Through the exchange of goods between counties, the territory's economy will be stimulated." Ouyang Shua had another purpose in setting up a maritime cargo fleet, which was to lay a solid foundation for future ocean trade, cultivate relevant talents, and accumulate experience. The next step was naturally to use Jiaozhou Port as an opportunity to open up the sea trade between Shanghai City and Lingnan Province. With another step, Ouyang Shua's goal might be Chuanzhou Port in Chuanzhou City. Step by step, he would weave Shanghai City's maritime trade network. There was no doubt that maritime trade was the core of the territory's adventure. This was something that Ouyang Shua had already laid out when Shanghai City was still a county. Ouyang Shua's arrangement was also related to the upcoming third system update. It was now the end of August, and there were only 4 months left until Gaia's 3 years. According to the usual practice, there would be another system update in Gaia's 3 years. If there were no deviations in history, in Ouyang Shua's memory, the third system update would have a profound impact on the game's ecology. Ouyang Shua naturally wanted to take advantage of his rebirth and prepare for a rainy day. With Ingyu's nod, the temporary meeting officially ended. Although Ouyang Shua had only said a few words to the 4 major bureaus, it was unknown how much effort each bureau would have to expend in order to achieve their goals. As for the other general matters, Ouyang Shua believed that the 4 bureau chiefs could already make their own decisions. Even if they couldn't handle it well, there was still the famous minister Xiao He to oversee things. With this arrangement, even if Ouyang Shuo wasn't in Shanghai City, the territory could still follow the path he had planned and advance rapidly, leaving other competitors far behind. Ouyang Shuo could finally start his journey with peace of mind. During dinner, Ouyang Shuo didn't see Qing Er's figure. Although the manor had been expanded several times, the tradition of eating together was still passed down. Although Ouyang Shuo was becoming colder and colder, he didn't really want to become a loner. Why didn't Qing Er come for dinner? I know. And you put down her chopsticks and said, "Isn't Big Brother going to war tomorrow?" Qing wants to work overnight to sew the inner armor and boots. This girl, Ouyang Shuo, shook his head and felt warmth in his heart. He didn't dote on his two sisters for nothing. They were so sensible that it made his heart ache. Zissou, prepare a lunchbox and send it to Qing. Yes, I want to go too. Bing who was sitting on Ouyang Shuo's left, became restless again. Ouyang Shuo knocked her little head. You're not allowed to go. Don't disturb your sister Qing Er's work. Big Brother's a bad guy. Bing is only going to see sister. I won't make trouble. The little girl turned her head and said, I'm very angry. Come and coax me. Ouyang Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hey, you're still being stubborn with Big Brother. I haven't settled the score with you for drawing a little turtle on Mister's face. Ouyang Shuo brought up the past. Hearing this, Bing immediately put on a bitter face and didn't dare to throw a tantrum. This matter had already become a stain on the little girl's reputation. The smart Bing shouldn't have been so careless and let Big Brother catch her by the tail. After dinner, Ouyang Shuo talked to Song Jia. Since the fall of Tianchuan County, Song Jia had been staying in the protectorate and didn't return to the Eastern Fence Sword faction. Only when she learned that the Song family had safely arrived at Songqing County did she feel slightly relieved. Even so, this girl still frowned all day long. The fall of Tianchuan County was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue for the Song family. As a member of the Song family, Song Jia couldn't do anything and couldn't help but blame herself. In the past few days, Ouyang Shuo had been busy with government affairs and didn't have the time to comfort her. Seeing that he was going to go to war tomorrow and didn't know when he would return, he naturally had to comfort her. Jia, don't worry. The fall of Tianchuan County isn't necessarily a bad thing for the Song family. Song Jia was very surprised and said with a bitter smile, Blockhead, you don't have to comfort me. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. Do you think I'm lying? Then tell me, why isn't it a bad thing? Song Jia's eyes were filled with hope. Right now, she was like a drowning person, longing to grab onto a straw. She knew that Wu Yi would never speak without thinking. Since he said that, there must be a way. Although Uncle won this time's seizure of power, it wasn't a clean victory. On the inside, your second uncle and the other family members were holding him back. On the outside, the Ruan family and the others were stirring up trouble. With the fall of Tianchuan County, all of these unstable factors would disappear like smoke in thin air. This is what they mean by without destruction, there can be no construction. With the fall of Tianchuan County, Song Tianli completely lost the trust of the old master. After this setback, the old master would probably completely give up on the idea of fighting for supremacy and retire in peace. As for the Ruan family and the others, they still had a score to settle with them. How could they still interfere with the Song family's affairs? In this way, Song Tianxiong's power in the Song family would no longer be hidden. The only stain was that, as the territory owner, Song Wan would have to bear the responsibility for the fall of Tianchuan County. Song Wan had to take the blame for this. Fortunately, Song Tianxiong and his son had Ouyang Shuo behind them. To be honest, Ouyang Shuo was also responsible for the fall of Tianchuan County. When the time was right, he would naturally compensate Song Wan. To be continued. Chapter 461. Hearing this, Song Jia's expression softened a little. She asked, break and then rebuild. Breaking is breaking, but where's the rebuilding? In Song Jia's eyes, the current Song clan was a mess. There was nothing praiseworthy about her father, holding the reins of power. It was just a heavy burden. Ouyang Shuo smiled lightly. I've already spoken to Uncle before this. Now that Shanghai City had taken over Zhaoqing County, the Song clan would have to withdraw from the business in Tianchuan County and establish the Song Clan Chamber of Commerce, returning to their old business. Before your elder brother Song, when left Tianchuan County, he had already taken all the funds from Tianchuan County with him. Isn't this a good time to establish the Chamber of Commerce? You can write to Uncle and explain this matter. Shanghai City is full of merchant guilds. It won't be easy for the Song clan to establish a foothold in the city with the little capital they have. Song Jia was an intelligent woman, and she was quite knowledgeable in the art of business. For a chamber of commerce to establish itself, the right time, the right place, and the right people were indispensable. Even so, it still required several generations of painstaking efforts to establish a firm foothold. The Song's Chamber of Commerce, other than a bit of startup capital, had no connections, no products to sell, and no reputation. If they rashly rushed into the sea of commerce, they would be eaten up in minutes without leaving even a dregs. The shopping mall was like a battlefield, filled with smoke. In any case, I'm also the future son-in-law of the Song family. Naturally, I will not treat them badly. Seeing through Song Jia's worries, Ouyang Shuo comforted. Firstly, I will not take back the 68,000 gold coins that Song took from the Bank of the Four Seas Tianchuan County branch. Instead, I will convert it into a low-interest loan for him to use. Secondly, the Song enterprise would become the exclusive distributor of the pearls. Thirdly, they would also subsidize the 10 merchant ships of the Song Empire. With this, the Chamber of Commerce would have sufficient funds, goods, and channels to establish a foothold in Shanghai City. How the Chamber of Commerce develops in the future depends on how Uncle manages it. I believe that with Uncle's business ability, the rise of the Song Empire is only a matter of time. Hearing this, Song Jia's eyes reddened. She said in a low voice, "Wui, you don't have to be like this." She knew that her lover had already broken the precedent for the Song clan. For the first time in Shanghai City, a royal merchant had appeared. Other than compensating the Song clan, Ouyang Shuo also didn't want to make things difficult for Song Jia. As the eldest daughter of the Song family, Song Jia had an illustrious status. If she didn't lend a helping hand during the family's most difficult time, she would be ridiculed in the back. At this stage, it was time to truly test the standard of a lord. There was one more thing that Ouyang Shuo wanted to discuss with Song Jia. Once he entered Zhaoqing County, the alliance channel would be blocked. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo had to arrange for someone to represent him in the alliance. Although the members of the Shanghai alliance rarely gathered together except for battles. In fact, more than 90% of the alliance's affairs were coordinated through the alliance channel. In this battle, they even said that they wanted to send reinforcements, but they were rejected by Ouyang Shuo. From Ouyang Shuo's point of view, the current situation was still under Shanghai City's control, and it was not the time to send reinforcements. If they had to form an alliance to attack a county, then the light of Shanghai City would be much dimmer, and this was not what Ouyang Shuo wanted. The responsibility of the allies was to expand their influence in the region. The fall of Tianchuan County was the biggest negative example of this. Although Song, had formed the Shanghai Alliance Tianchuan Alliance under Ouyang Shuo's suggestion, it was obvious that the so-called Tianchuan Alliance was a dish in front of the Southern Alliance. It could not withstand the destruction at all. At this crucial moment, the members of the Tianchuan Alliance lost their voices, which made Ouyang Shuo very disappointed. He didn't want the regional alliances established by the other allies to be so weak. Among the allies, the one who was in the most difficult situation was naturally Tao Wu. There were probably not many lords in the entire capital who dared to form an alliance with Tao Wu. It was reported that Di Chun had already prepared to once again reduce the living space of Wanshe County, and his ultimate goal was to completely uproot Wanshe County. After all, the entire capital province was already Di Chen's exclusive territory. In his core region, there was the territory of the Shanghai Alliance. It was easy to imagine how uneasy and displeased Di Chen would be. Since he knew Di Chen's intention, Ouyang Shua naturally would not let him succeed. Recently, Ouyang Shua had the intention to increase his support for Wanshur County, including prioritizing the purchase of weapons and equipment, and increasing the financial support for the Wanshur County branch of the Bank of the Four Seas. Wanshur County was the bridgehead of the Shanghai Alliance in the north of China region, and they could not afford to lose it. Not only Ouyang Shua, but the other allies also unanimously supported Tao Wu. Bai Hua, Feng Xiuhuang, and the others also prioritized the sale of weapons and equipment to Wanshur County. The other allies had no complaints about this. Tao Wu was originally prepared to be abandoned by the alliance, but he did not expect such an ending. The young man was quiet and inarticulate, and he only vowed to be a stubborn rock that was firmly nailed to the north. Apart from Tao Wu, the Siege Lion was in Jiangchuan Province, and the Dragon-Seeking Acupoint was in Minnan Province, and they were all facing strong opponents. The situation was not optimistic for them. Under such circumstances, Ouyang Shua would not allow them to send troops to reinforce Shanghai City. Even Feng Xiuhuang was facing many challenges. To the northwest of Fallen Phoenix City was Azura County. To the northeast was Handan City. To the southwest was Liye County. To the south was Luoyang City. And further south was Danyang City. At a glance, Fallen Phoenix City was practically surrounded by the Yinhuang Alliance. The reason for this was related to the 6 lords of Handan City at the start of the game. Before the game started, the 6 powers had already reached a consensus to divide up the hinterlands of the China region. The 6 territories were almost all concentrated in the Central Plains. Who would have thought that Feng Xiuhuang would fall out with his family and leave the alliance? As such, Fallen Phoenix City was naturally surrounded by allies, but now it was surrounded by a pack of wolves. At this stage, the powers of the various territories had not stepped out of the province, so it was not a big deal. In the later stages of the game, the territories would start to fight for supremacy, and Fallen Phoenix City would be in a difficult situation. Because of this, Feng Xiuhuang was planning ahead, trying his best to increase the influence of his territory in Taiyuan Province, and strive to unify Taiyuan Province as soon as possible to accumulate strength for the upcoming war. Among the allies, Bai Hua was the only one who was doing well. This overlord of the South Cloud Province in his previous life had already started to show his prowess, conquering cities in the Yunnan Province. Ouyang Shua actually had a plan for the entire southern border, but it was not convenient to announce it to the public, so he could only think about it in secret. In order to realize Ouyang Shua's plan, the precondition was that the members of the alliance had to work hard. At the very least, they had to become the overlord of the province they were in. Otherwise, it would all be empty talk. Therefore, in the future, not only would Ouyang Shua not trouble his allies, Shanghai City would even send troops to help them when the time was right, to help them establish themselves as the overlords of the region. The entire alliance would be receiving messages every day. If Ouyang Shua did not receive any messages from the alliance, the entire alliance would be in chaos. In the past, when Ouyang Shua was not around, it was Mu Lanyue who took on this role. However, Mu Lanyue was still the magistrate of the Mulan Prefecture and was busy with government affairs. According to Ouyang Shua's observation, Yu Yu's potential was not bad, and he was preparing to groom her to improve. In the future, when the time was right, Ouyang Shua was also planning to promote Mu Lanyue to the position of county governor. Therefore, Ouyang Shua had to find a replacement. Sun Xiaoye had also played this role before, but Xiaoye seemed to be determined to stay in Cliff Mountain City. In the short term, she probably did not plan to move. Feeling helpless, Ouyang Shua thought of Song Jia. After thinking about it, Song Jia was the most suitable. All the members of the alliance knew that Song Jia was Ouyang Shua's only girlfriend and the future mistress of the Shanghai territory. Most importantly, Song Jia's ability was enough to take on this responsibility. Although Song Jia liked to play with swords in the game, in reality, she was also a genius in the business world. Whether it was her communication skills or her coordination skills, they were all top-notch. He just did not know if Song Jia was willing to leave the mountain. To be continued. Chapter 462. All right. Ouyang Shua had just opened his mouth when Song Jia agreed without any hesitation. Ouyang Shua couldn't conceal his surprise. Actually, I wanted to help you for a long time. Song Jia leaned to the side and faced Ouyang Shua. Her eyes were clear and moving as she spoke in a low voice. Seeing how busy you are every day, yet I can't be of any help, I feel apologetic. What about your martial arts dream? What are you going to do? Jia, I don't want you to feel wronged. This was exactly what Ouyang Shua was worried about. Who says you can't be a heroine if you're not in a sect? Wasn't Empress Sunflower also living in seclusion in the palace? Her martial arts were still unparalleled. Besides, there are no sects in the current Jianghu. It's very boring. Staying in the Eastern Fen Sword sect all day, Song Jia was a bit bored. Since that's the case, I'm relieved. Ouyang Shua immediately announced this through the Alliance channel. From today onwards, Song Jia would officially represent Ouyang Shua in carrying out her duties as a member of the Mountain and Sea Alliance and coordinating all matters related to the Alliance. Song Jia officially moved from behind the scenes to the front of the stage. It was still unknown what role this legendary woman would play in the alliance of mountains and seas. After the conversation, Ouyang Shua did not return to the Everlasting Hall. Instead, he turned around and walked towards the Green Extreme Hall. The Green Extreme Hall was Qing Er's bedroom. In the Extreme Green Palace, Qing Er specially ordered people to build a tailor's workshop, so that when she studied the art of tailoring, she would no longer have to go to the tailor's shop. With the expansion of Shanghai City, Qing Er's tailor shop was now 7 to 8 kilometers away from the Marquis Manor. The hall was brightly lit, indicating that the master of the hall had yet to rest. Upon seeing Ouyang Shua, the maidservants in the hall immediately moved to the sides and bowed. Ouyang Shua waved his hand to indicate that the maidservant didn't have to inform him, and he directly walked towards the workshop in the West Wing. There were 5 or 6 rooms in the West Wing, and they were all Qing Er's workshops. There was a warehouse dedicated to storing leather and cloth, a material room dedicated to processing and tanning leather, and 2 apprentice rooms. Other than that, there was also the design room, where Qing Er drew the blueprints and read the technical manuals, as well as the workshop where Qing Er worked. The whole West Wing was fully occupied. The entire Green Extreme Palace did not seem like a lady's bedroom. When this younger sister of his became serious, her craziness towards tailoring was enough to make others feel deep respect for her. Ouyang Shua passed through the corridor and arrived outside the workshop. Qing was the only one in the spacious workshop. The oil lamps around them crackled, and the flames swayed in the night wind, casting messy shadows on the walls. Under the light, Qing looked focused. She moved the steel needles in her hands as if they were flying. Only the shadows of her movements could be seen. An inner armor was slowly taking shape, and it was about to be completed. Amazingly, the Beast King's scales, which were supposed to be tough, were as fragile as paper in front of Qing Er's steel needles. They were easily pierced through. Ouyang Shua guessed that it should be the result of the skill bonus. A master tailor was already extraordinary. Other than that, the steel needle in Qing Er's hand was no ordinary object either. Last year, Ouyang Shua had gifted Qing Er a dark gold tailoring toolkit. Not long ago, the little girl hardened her heart and used her own money to buy a purple gold tailoring toolkit. Just this toolkit alone cost half of Qing Er's savings. When the little miser went crazy, it was really frightening. Ouyang Shua could even imagine Qing Er's pained expression at that time. As a result, that unassuming steel needle could be considered a purple gold grade item. Ouyang Shua also noticed that there were beads of sweat on Qing Er's forehead. It was obvious that such high-intensity work was a great challenge for her physical strength. There was a food box not far from the workbench. Needless to say, the little girl probably hadn't touched the food box that Zisu had given her. Ouyang Shua didn't dare to disturb her. He waited quietly outside the door. About half an hour later, the inner armor was finally completed. Ching was overjoyed. Under the candlelight, her beautiful face looked even more beautiful and alluring. At the same time, Ouyang Shuo heard the system announcement. System announcement. Congratulations to Shanghai City for having the first master tailor in the player territory. Shanghai City is granted the title Tailoring's Hometown. Congratulations to the player. Don't say you have no clothes. Ching had finally taken the most crucial step and successfully reached the master level with the Beast King scales. Ouyang Shuo was outside the door, checking the title's attributes. Tailoring's Hometown. Increase the proficiency of tailors in the territory by 10. Increase the success rate of tailors in the territory by 10. Increase the attraction rate of tailors to refugees by 25. That's great. Ching has made a great contribution again. Compared to the title, Tailoring's Hometown, the inner armor was nothing in Ouyang Shuo's eyes. Ouyang Shuo believed that the tailor players who hadn't gone to sleep at the moment would be ecstatic, who knew how much hard work it would save them from just a small title. Subsequently, the sound of a system notification entered Ouyang Shuo's ears. System announcement. Congratulations to the player. Don't say you have no clothes. The title, Tailoring's Hometown, Shipbuilding's Hometown, and Tailoring's Hometown have triggered the integration system. Do you want to integrate them? Not long ago, Zhang Dehai had become a master shipbuilding, and his territory had received the title Shipbuilding's Hometown. Shipbuilding's Hometown. Increase the proficiency of the territory's shipbuilding skills by 10. Increase the success rate of tailors in the territory by 10. Increase the attraction rate of tailors to refugees by 25. With Zhang Dehai's promotion, the territory's shipbuilding industry had experienced a boom. So far, apart from the North Sea port, the territory had also built large shipyards in the South Mountain port and the Lizhou port to meet the market demand. The three shipyards were making money every day. Integrate. This time, Ouyang Shuo didn't hesitate. System announcement. Congratulations to the player. Don't say you have no clothes. The territory title has been successfully integrated. Shanghai City has automatically received the title Craftsman's Paradise. The original Shipbuilding's Hometown and Craftsman's Hometown titles have automatically disappeared. Title, Craftsman's Paradise, Purple Gold, Attribute. Territory's popularity increases by 10. Increase the proficiency of the territory's skilled talents by 10. Increase the success rate of the territory's skilled talents by 10. Increase the attraction rate of the territory's skilled talents by 25. Characteristic, Craftsman's Soul. Increase the effect of Craftsman by 15. Evaluation. This title can be upgraded to Craftsman's Holy Land. The upgrade condition is to obtain at least 2 more single-category titles, such as Carpentry's Hometown or Chef's Hometown. Ouyang Shuo let out a long sigh after he finished reading. This meant that the territory's skilled talents will be promoted on all fronts. At this moment, the happiest ones would be the Falling Moon Guild and Thread. Of course, the territory would benefit the most. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo was already eyeing the Craftsman's Holy Land. This wasn't because Ouyang Shuo was blindly confident. The root cause was the 100 schools of thought that had settled down in Shanghai City. With the Craftsman's Paradise's blessing, it wouldn't be difficult for these unremarkable inheritances to give birth to 2 or 3 grandmasters. Ouyang Shuo could already imagine the future of Shanghai City's skilled talents. While Ouyang Shuo was in a daze, Ching had already discovered his presence. "Big brother, why are you here?" Ching Er's voice was filled with surprise and exhaustion. Ouyang Shuo raised his head and walked into the workshop. He said with pity, "I'm here to see you, silly girl." He took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat off Ching Er's forehead. Hearing this, Ching Er's heart was filled with sweetness. Her little face was filled with happiness. "Someone here." The maid who was guarding the corridor quickly walked in. "Instruct the kitchen to prepare a meal. This marquis will accompany second miss to eat. Also, ask them to prepare a ginseng chicken soup for second miss to recuperate." "Yes." Hearing this, the maid immediately retreated. The Marquis' mansion's kitchen was staffed 24 hours a day. As long as Ouyang Shual wanted to eat, there would be hot food ready at any time. Needless to say, Zissou had specifically instructed the kitchen to prepare meals at any time. Apparently, Zissou knew Qing Er's character very well. She knew that once Second Miss was busy, she wouldn't have time to eat. Big brother, it's so late. I can eat by myself. You still have to go to battle tomorrow. Go and rest. Qing was not going to comply. It's okay. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand, indicating that Qing should stop trying to persuade him. Qing pouted. She turned around to pick up the inner armor on the workbench and handed it to Ouyang Shuo. Look, this is the inner armor I made. Big brother, take a look. It's a surprise. The inner armor looked ordinary. It was a thick, dark gray color. What was amazing was that although the inner armor was made of scales, there were no signs of stitching. It was as if the inner armor was made of tan scales. Ouyang Shuo was indeed curious about the inner armor Qing made. He took it and checked its attributes. Name: Beast King Inner Armor, Purple Gold Level. Type: Light Armor. Weight: 2 kilograms. Defense: 105. Toughness: 85. Features: Increase internal force cultivation speed by 20%. Remarks: Made of rare materials, Beast King scales, excellent toughness, high quality, and superplasticity of the inner energy. Using the inner energy to refine, it can improve various attributes and even advance. The entire inner armor weighed only 2 kilograms, but its defense and toughness were above the general level radiant armor. He wondered how Qing made it. It was indeed amazing. What was even more amazing was that Qing had attached the features of the training clothes she had learned before to the inner armor. She was even better than before. What a genius idea. As for the refinement of the inner energy, it was a characteristic of the Beast King scales. Given the characteristics of Gaia, Ouyang Shuo didn't think it was as simple as it looked. It wasn't something that could advance after a few months of refining. At the very least, it had to be refined over a long period of time to have a chance. Not bad. Ouyang Shuo nodded and praised. Girl, you're a genius. Of course. Qing was so happy that her little face was squeezed together and her eyes were squinted into a line, but she insisted on being stubborn. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.